To another episode of True Crime with Tiff, Kline. I am here again with my partner in crime, Aspen Connor. Tonight we're going to be talking about one criminal who we're going to give all the disrespect to, Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson has made the news again, unfortunately. And Aspen and I sat on a live panel at CrimeCon Vegas in the end of May to listen to I'm going to try to be professional here, bullshit that came out of Mark Geragos's mouth. Mark Geragos is a defense lawyer for Scott Peterson. Now, everybody's entitled to a lawyer. He's doing his job. We get that 100%. Somebody has to do that job. But the thing where we have a problem with is, one, when we watched him do the live panel, and there was a good 1,000 people in the audience, he wore sweatpants when he walked out on stage and said the F word multiple times. And used a cell phone while his colleagues were speaking on stage. So Aspen got up and just left because he just couldn't deal with it anymore. I only went to hear the bullshit and see what other lies that they were going to come up with to try to prove his innocence. And I'm a strong believer that Scott is 100% guilty. And I've been following this case since December of 2002. This was the first true crime case besides John Bonet that I really dove into. And this is how I discovered Nancy Grace. And this is one of the cases that I know upside down, inside out, and I could tell you everything about it. So I really do believe Scott's the disrespectful criminal here. And now that A&E has released the docuseries that just aired last night and tonight, Aspen and I are going to watch it live together, and we're going to record our responses as we watch it. We hope this is our first time recording a reaction video. So we're hoping that you can hear the audio with the track of this docuseries. So we're going to wing it, hope for the best. We got to start somewhere. But to catch you up with the Laci Peterson story, if you haven't heard already, this happened in December 2002. Laci Peterson went missing, and she was pregnant with her eight-month-old baby, Connor, in Modesto, California. And her body washed ashore with Connor a few months later, and unfortunately, not all of her body was found. But Scott had a mistress and lied a lot, said he was in Paris, and then showed up to the vigil and tried to help look for Laci, but then he just started getting really weird, dyed his hair, had a boat nobody knew about, was trying to flee to Mexico, and all the signs point to yes, shake the magic 8-ball, this piece of shit killed Laci. I mean, there's no other. They're trying to come out now with all this evidence that there was a van across the street and a burnt mattress in the van and a robber across the street while somebody was away. And they're really trying to use that theory to prove Scott's innocence. And even his sister-in-law went to law school to prove his innocence. And I read an article the other day with Sharon Rocha, who's Laci's mom, and she's like, she's just tired. She is so tired, and there's no new evidence, which we know. This has been out for a while. I don't know why they're trying to make it new. Let Laci and Connor rest. And Scott did come off death row. He had that charge flipped, but he is in for life. It's not coming out. I don't care how much they try to say he's innocent. He's not innocent. So one thing that Mark Geragos had said at CrimeCon that still just blows my mind was, he goes, I just can't believe 20 years later, we're still talking about Scott Peterson. And then he said something like about Michael Jackson. He's like, 20 years later, we're talking about how Michael Jackson isn't innocent, but Scott Peterson is. And I looked over at Aspen and I said, who the fuck is saying that? Like, who is saying that Michael Jackson isn't innocent and Scott Peterson is? Like, I'm pretty sure the narrative has flipped. A lot of people think Michael Jackson was set up. I wasn't there. I don't know. This isn't about Michael Jackson, but the fact that he said that, I literally said out loud at the panel, I was like, who the fuck's saying that? Nobody's walking around saying Scott Peterson's innocent except the Innocence Project and Scott Peterson's sister-in-law, and obviously Mark Geragos. So we found it very disrespectful of Mark Geragos to walk out on stage in sweatpants with a cell phone and using the F word while on stage. Like, 7,000 people buy tickets to go to CrimeCon, and he couldn't bother to, as a lawyer, a defense lawyer, couldn't bother to just dress up for an hour. And he was the only panel that they didn't let anybody do a Q&A with at the end, because I think they knew better. A lot of people went to support Laci's family and Laci, not Mark and Scott. So I think there was some confusion there. Again, we only went because we wanted to see the bullshit they were going to spew. And I've followed this case for over 20 years, and I had to go. I could not sit in there, but it was very hard to get through because I felt like it was just one big disrespectful. I mean, he couldn't even Aspen, I don't know if you remember, but he couldn't even say, I'm sorry for the loss of Lacey and Connor through all of this. I paid my respects to her family. I do remember him basically making Lacey out to be fat and called Amber Fry, who was Scott Peterson's mistress, a hussy while he was on stage. I remember that. It was just all around disrespect. And I vomited in my mouth. Like, he does not need to come back to CrimeCon. I'm actually really surprised he didn't call or have Scott call live while he was there, like he did the Menendez brothers in Nashville. And it could be why he had his cell phone out and maybe it didn't go through, but don't come out in sweatpants. You were a Hollywood big time defense lawyer and you couldn't even put pants on. You just roll out of bed in CrimeCon, like up in Caesars and just come in. Like your colleagues are dressed to the nines. They're giving you their full undivided attention, but as soon as they speak, he's on his phone. That left such a bad taste in my mouth. And then we decided that we know that they only did that panel to promote this new show. So this new show is on A&E. Part 1 aired last night. Part 2 is tonight. And it's Scott Peterson, The New Evidence. It aired on July 16th, 2026. And you're going to see our reaction. Now, again, we don't like Scott. We're giving Scott the disrespect he deserves. And I just gave Mark Garagos the disrespect he deserves because he's just, again, I know he's doing a job. Somebody in the world has to do it. And nobody wants to be that guy. But he's a smug asshole. And the fact that he couldn't even pay his respects to Lacey at the end, like, to me was just done. Like, I have no respect for that man. So without further ado, we are going to watch this. And every reaction you see is real because we have not watched this yet. So don't be surprised if you see me like throw something across the room or smash something because I get so mad at this. I just want Lacey to have respect. And she was a gorgeous girl. I read the book her mom wrote called For Lacey, and it's one of my favorite books. And hopefully this won't make us too sick to our stomach, but we'll see. Oh,
I just wanted to say to kind of echo what you were saying, I think probably about 60%, 70% of the people that went to that panel at CrimeCon in Vegas. And I would argue that it probably was one of, if not the busiest panels that they had. So I think for the fact that I heard that there were 3,000 people in the room. I don't know if the truth to that.
I don't know.
Because spatial awareness is hard.
There was a lot in there, though. I think there was as much in there as there was in Nancy Grace.
I do want to say quickly that, like you said, one of the things that stood out for me initially was that comment he made, in my opinion, about, when I felt like he basically called Lacey, 8-month-old heifer, pregnant, fatty, and then called Amber Fry a hussy. So, and never once did they mention Connor's name in that panel. And that was something that stood out to me. I also do want to say it's hard because I do in a way have respect for the career that Mark Garagos has had. I agree. The sweatpants was something I noticed quickly, of course, and being as close as we were almost right up in front. And, that was hard and he kept looking at his phone, which is why I was like, oh, is Scott going to call in? And I can talk about this later. So I know we can get to it, but I will say that I also do have a level of respect for Chris, the A&E host, and the female detective. Her name is escaping me right now, but I understand they knew they were walking onto a stage where they were going to be met with lots and lots of hesitation and opposition. And so I do want to at least acknowledge that's not an easy thing to do. And I thought that they handled the situation, at least on the panel, very professionally. I was able later to actually even, have a conversation with them. So, and that was something that I said. I was honest. I said, I think like many, it'll take a mountain for you to prove to me that Scott Peterson is not guilty, but I am willing to watch the evidence that you have to present and hear what you have to say. And I just wanted to let them know that I know that they could not have been comfortable, at least going in front of that many people and not knowing what kind of reaction they were going to get.
I think that the reaction was actually the opposite of what I predicted. I thought people were going to be angry. It was more just like a silence. Like people didn't know if they should react or not. That from what I felt like I was loud, but that's me having my remarks. And I remember the person sitting next to me is a believer that Scott is innocent. And it took I took all I had to just be like, are you kidding? But everybody's entitled to their opinions. And again, I'm like you, I'm open-minded. If you can present evidence and convince me, I'm open to it, but good luck.
And even if I don't agree, if you can present respectfully a compelling case. One, I'm not on that jury. I'm not going to be on that jury. So no matter what, my opinion really at the end of the day doesn't matter. But from what I have seen, like what they presented at that panel, I didn't hear any new evidence. Maybe they're saving it for what we're about to watch. I'm excited to watch it. Like I said, I told them, Chris, I believe, is the A&E host. And again, the female detective, her name is escaping me, and I'm so sorry.
Remember,
But,
yeah.
I said I will respectfully watch it, and I'm very intrigued to hear what you have to say. But something I heard Mark Garrigo say in an interview on a different podcast, it was just a short interview, but he said, he's like, the difference, in what happened at CrimeCon is, he's like, I think we probably lost 25% of the audience during that panel. He's like, 20 years ago, we would have lost 50% or 70%. I can't remember what he said. But I was like, well, that's true.
Yeah.
So, there is a different sentiment when things are looked at through a different through a different time. I mean, 20 years ago, a lot of us probably would not have thought the Menendez brothers may need to be looked at through a different light. I'm not saying they do. I'm just saying that there is more of a conversation happening there. And plus, we are in the year of, Alex Murdaugh getting, a new trial, Adam Montgomery getting a new trial. There's another high profile person that's getting a new trial. I can't think of, so who knows what's going to happen. But when we watch, maybe we're going to walk away from this convinced he's innocent.
And I do want to say that I respect what Mark does as his career. So, like I said, somebody has to be that person. Somebody has to take on these cases because as much as we don't like criminals, they're entitled to a lawyer just like anybody else in the world is. So he's doing his job as a defense attorney. So I respect that. I understand. That's not what I'm disgusted with. It's how he presented himself. And even though I don't like Scott, I feel like he didn't give his own clients the respect that he should have. And that's saying a lot because I hate Scott Peterson. So I feel like he didn't represent his client in the most professional way that he could, as well as getting on stage in front of thousands of people that pay money to come. He just had just arrogance. That's it. For what he does for a living, I respect. But him as a person,
right?
No. So I wanted to clear that up. So, all right.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that. And see, really quickly, I will say, it's hard because I think both of us would consider ourselves victims advocates and, advocates of, people that have gone through horrible things. And, and it can be a difficult thing when you always support the victims to then be open, to be fully open to, the rights also of who you think is absolutely guilty. But, that is one of the things that, I think is good about our judicial system. There are lots of problems with it, but I do think that one of the things that is good, and I don't think it would ever work. I don't think it would work. And I don't think the entire system of the courts would even be possible without defense attorneys. And something I've heard Mark Garrigo say in the past is that, a defense attorney's job is not to prove their client is innocent necessarily. It is to provide a fervent, defense and to basically keep the state in check to make sure there's not an abuse of power. And that is something I do think is fundamental and very, very important.
Yes.
Because the burden should be on the state. I mean, this is, granted, when these situations happen, we're talking about Lacey's life, we're talking about Connor's life, but we are also talking about Scott's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether we think he's 100% guilty or not, it is important that that's representative, that there's someone that is presenting the case that they feel is important.
Yeah.
To make sure things are...
Even if Scott, let's just say he is innocent, and I want to say this too, just to say he is innocent. Again, he deserves that right to be proven innocent, until proven guilty. So he also deserves, and I don't like saying it, but it's the truth. He also deserves the best defense he can get because that's what we're entitled to. So I feel like Mark probably isn't the best defense, but again, I'm not the jury, I'm not the judge, I'm not the family in the courtroom. I'm just from what I've watched over 20 years, and I don't know. I think they're grasping at straws at this point, and Scott is doing everything he can to get out of prison, and it's possible. I mean, it's don't ever say never because it happens. So I guess we'll get started.
We haven't watched yet.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And by the way, guys, if you haven't already know, Aspen has been on my show a few times. He's very familiar with the Delphi, Abby, and Libby case. He actually knows their families very well. He's attended their trials. And he recently was also at the Lexington, South Carolina Murdaugh retrial hearing. So he'll be following that more too. He goes all over. He's lucky. I wish I could attend these court trials, but if you ever want more info inside the courtroom, maybe you should have a podcast called Inside the Courtroom. Talk to Aspen, so he brings a lot of insight from the inside that we don't all get to see. So stay forward.
Well, and something, I mean, thank you for that. And something else, having produced a documentary for ABC News and Hulu on the Delphi case called Catching Their Killer, The Girls on the High Bridge, I also know a thing or two about being involved in a controversial project that people have very passionate and mixed opinions about. So so that's one of the reasons I'm intrigued to watch this, actually.
All right. Well, again, react the way you need to react. There's no filter here. And if we have to edit something later, I can, but I don't feel like I'm going to have to edit because I like being raw and real. So, but we'll give it a go. So,
a woman who was 8 months pregnant disappeared Christmas Eve and hasn't been seen since.
27-year-old Lacey Peterson. Dozens of people searched for Lacey.
There could be a body somewhere.
There were questions about husband Scott.
Scott said he left for fishing the day that Lacey disappeared.
We have claims of an affair.
Scott admitted he was cheating on Lacey. Scott Peterson now admits to both lying and cheating.
Detectives have focused their investigation on Lacey Peterson's husband, Scott.
It's one of the most famous cases in this country's history. For me, the Peterson case is in that category of unresolved things in your life.
In the case of Lacey Peterson, police identify her body and arrest her husband for her murder.
I've always believed that there are huge problems in this case.
Find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder.
The world knew that Scott was a philanderer who murdered his wife. But what if everything we knew about the case was just wrong?
Nearly 20 years after being convicted of killing his wife and their unborn child, Scott Peterson was back in court today seeking a new trial.
The Los Angeles Innocence Project has taken on Scott Peterson's defense.
Good morning, Your Honor. Paula Mitchell, Los Angeles Innocence Project, or Scott Peterson.
When an organization like the Los Angeles Innocence Project takes on a case, it means that they believe that this is a wrongful conviction, and they are arguing that Scott Peterson is absolutely innocent. Paula Mitchell is an appellate attorney. She has deep knowledge of the facts and the evidence and the science. And when I read the filings, I was blown away. They have brought out so many new aspects of this case that were previously unheard of, undiscussed, and they are putting forward new evidence that suggests that Lacey Peterson's disappearance was completely unrelated to Scott Peterson. I'm going to really deeply investigate the Los Angeles Innocence Project's filings.
It appears the detectives just decided to destroy this evidence.
He's the walking, talking incarnation of junk science.
This is crazy. He did not do this.
Do I think that we'll be able to answer this to whether Scott Peterson is guilty or innocent? I think we're going to get a lot closer than anyone ever has.
The trial of Scott Peterson is finally underway.
Scott Peterson was a cold, calculating person. I think he intended to kill Lacey.
If you ask people about this case, they'll just tell you that Scott did it.
Do I think Scott Peterson is the person responsible? Absolutely. You think justice was served?
Yeah. Why does the public find this case fascinating if it's so open and shut and it's just about a philandering husband who found a way to kill his wife so he could be with his mistress? If it was just that, it would have come and gone. This has been a mystery from day one. My name is Chris Pixley. I'm an attorney, and for over 30 years I've been doing trial practice. I'm a third-generation attorney in my family, and I was raised to believe actually that law is a noble profession and that it can do a lot of good. I've done work on behalf of individuals like the Menendez brothers. I represented Eric Menendez for over 10 years. But the Scott Peterson case has always bothered me. I always believed that this was not a thorough investigation. A man is in prison for the murder of his wife. I'd like to find out if he belongs there.
Police
Police in Modesto, California have very few leads in a search for Lacey Peterson.
Lacey Denise, if you're hearing Dad, we love you very much and we want you home.
At the time of Lacey Peterson's disappearance, I was a legal analyst for ABC's Good Morning America, Court TV, and CNN's Larry King Live. The prosecution may not only have to prove that Scott Peterson is a murderer, they may have to prove that he's a sociopath. I commented on the Peterson case from early 2003 all the way through the trial. Obviously, the judge did not agree with the DA. There wasn't evidence of scratch marks. Nobody called them scratch marks. It was a genuine mystery. For every piece of evidence that you marshaled against Scott Peterson, most of which had to do with his character, there were these unexplained questions about the actual physical scene of the crime. There were unexplained questions about how he could have gotten away with it.
We don't know when she was killed, where she was killed, how she was killed.
Bodies turn up in the chilly waters of the bay.
They were identified as Lacey Peterson and her unborn son.
Scott Peterson says he launched his boat here to go fishing the day before Christmas.
Scott Peterson always maintained his innocence. And now the Los Angeles Innocence Project is arguing to the federal court that the constitutional basis of his conviction is not viable, and that he was wrongfully prosecuted and convicted. First, they're arguing that new fetal biometric science suggests that Lacey Peterson likely didn't die on December 24, 2002, that she may not have died for many days or even weeks later. If they're right, it means that Scott Peterson is innocent. Secondly, new computational hydrodynamic modeling suggests that if Lacey Peterson's body had been placed in the bay, in the location where Scott Peterson was fishing, her body and Connor's body would not have been recovered where they were. The new science is really the game changer. But they also are raising the possibility that this is a malicious prosecution. They are challenging the integrity of the criminal investigation, arguing that not only did the Modesto police not investigate the many, many witnesses that came forward with sightings of Lacey on the morning of December 24th, they also destroyed evidence in the case. If the Los Angeles Innocence Project's new evidence is reliable, it raises dramatic questions about the viability of the state's entire story. I'm going to talk to experts, some from the original prosecution, some who had nothing to do with the case, to get their unbiased views of the case. It's an exciting proposition to be able to really stress test both the factual evidence and the new science. This is the first time that we've really started to get an honest evaluation of what went on 20 years ago surrounding the Peterson case.
Prosecution contentions that Scott Peterson killed his wife Lacey and their unborn son Connor on Christmas Eve 2002.
What bothered me most about this case is that we're supposed to believe that he murdered his wife, he left absolutely no forensic evidence, he moved her body multiple times across a great distance in broad daylight. I want to try to retrace Scott Peterson's steps at the time of day and the time of year that he was there.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you for doing this with me.
My pleasure. I'm Ninette Toosby. I'm a retired LAPD detective. I was with LAPD for almost 25 years. After my retirement, I became involved with the LA Innocence Project as an expert, providing them with insight on police procedures.
So the thing that we want to do today is go to all the locations that Scott Peterson is alleged to have traveled to in the course of disposing of his wife's body and just determine how plausible that is with your expert eye on all of this.
You know, you can read about something in a file, but it is never the same as when you go there and you actually get an understanding of the layout.
One of the things that's important in terms of our starting point is that the events of December 23rd, the night before Lacey Peterson's disappearance, are undisputed. Scott and Lacey go to Lacey's sister's hair salon to get Scott a haircut. They get pizza, they bring it home, and they start a movie, and then Lacey calls her mother late night.
We were going to their house, Christmas morning. And she was looking forward to it. She and Scott are just so much in love. They're just, I think everybody envies their relationship. They're just perfect together.
It's what happens after Lacey's phone call to her mother where the stories diverge. And that's when the investigation really starts. The state's theory is that Scott, through means that are unknown, murdered his wife, and the next morning that he had the presence of mind to make searches on the computer for things that only Lacey would be searching for, to load her body into the back of his truck, cover it with some umbrellas, wave to the neighbors. And of course, the defense has always argued this is entirely implausible. And I want to see for myself. This is the Peterson home. This is essentially the same physical setup that it was back in 2002 when Lacey Peterson went missing. Generally the same time of day, the same general time of year. What do you first notice about this in terms of the alleged crime?
It's not a particularly deep driveway, so it's very close to the street, and it's very close to the house across the street because it's a narrow street, and then also how close the garage is to the neighbor. It was a one-story house then, so there isn't really a huge amount of privacy between the homes and just this whole area in general.
Chris Wolf, one of the witnesses, reported seeing Scott that morning.
Deb Wolf says she had a brief chat with Scott Christmas Eve morning.
She saw him putting umbrellas in the back of his truck. She reported that his truck was facing into the driveway.
If I were planning on carrying a body out, I probably would have backed in the truck. But even so, let's just say, the truck was parked the way it was parked. To carry a body out and get that body into the bed of the truck in an area that is, for all intents and purposes, quite open, it's a very risky endeavor if you want to go unnoticed. Even if the body was completely wrapped, it's going to look like a body. It doesn't mean it cannot happen. It's just how likely is it that you could successfully do that without detection.
Honestly, the state's theory, and it was what Scott Peterson was convicted on, is the idea that he loaded Lacey's body in the back of his pickup truck. Doesn't make sense.
All right. So what did you think about that part?
It was interesting. I definitely felt like, there, it's definitely, I think, going to be a very narrative, take on the evidence that they're presenting. Like even the first thing that stood out to me was the indication that this is not a case that we would, still be talking about if there weren't questions. I felt like that was a little bit of a leap. Because I feel like we're more oversaturated because of social media today with cases that are similar or cases that take the public's attention. Whereas if you look back at 2002, with the way that news spread and the way that news was presented, we didn't have the access to 24/7 social media. We did, cable news. But, if you think about, there really are only a handful of those cases that from that time period that really stand out. And it's the ones that gripped the nation's attention. And it's not necessarily because there are questions, like I would say Natalie Holloway, John Benet Ramsey. That one, there is questions. But I don't think anyone really had questions about Natalie Holloway or Lacey Peterson. I don't think that's what has kept the intrigue of this case. I think it's the horrendous nature of what happened to Lacey and Connor, and the monster that we kind of watched in front of our eyes. At least, that was our perception. Maybe they'll change our minds here, but that stood out to me right away. And then I had lots of other observations that I can probably go over at different times, because I don't want to take up too much time for each break. But I definitely noticed they're laying the groundwork for, in my opinion, using very selective language and very kind of almost cherry picking the facts from the case that they're using to present. And if you look at the language, narrow street, houses close together, we're here at the same time of day, at the same time of year, but we don't know when she went missing. So like there's all of these contradictions already in what they're saying. And if the new evidence that they're really basing all of this off of is that one, they think that Lacey Ann could have potentially been alive for days after the 24th. But then they're also saying that, the location that Connor and Lacey were covered in the water from, how would they be able to track that without inputting a date into the program they're using to come up with where she should have come up? So I'm intrigued to keep listening to hear more about that, because I feel like that was a very selective way to present that. And if someone wasn't paying close attention, they might be like, oh, that is new evidence. But you're only going to get the result that they want if you put the date there, the date that fits their theory. And to my knowledge, they've never presented an alternate date other than that it might not have been the same date that day.
Yeah,
So,
that's what popped out to me more than anything in that first part, was them not knowing exactly when she was put in that bay. So they're saying it could have been the 23rd, could have been the 24th, could have been a week later, months later. And I never really thought about that, like with the 20 years watching this case. If she was put out later, I mean, where was she? Who had her? And that would kind of clear Scott. But I just think there's too much circumstantial evidence for me. That's what I'm basing this case off of. But
well,
it just
scientifically
like you said,
also, scientifically you couldn't if you don't know when she was killed, then you should have no way of knowing where her body should have came up.
Absolutely. Yep. The boat really aggravates me because of the cover. They're saying that the cover wasn't, like, the handles weren't stretched out enough and there was no wear and tear. But if it was brand new and he only used it one time, there's not going to be rips and tears and dirt and stains on the cover. Okay. The boat being taken out in the water with a dummy, and it just so shows that it sinks. I mean, I think the reason why the judge threw it out and not being allowed in for evidence is because if it sank like that, if he brought Lacey out, did he just let her sink with the boat and then he's soaked and wet? And I just don't understand. And going back to the old evidence with the 5 concrete anchors that he had, if he had those in the boat and Lacey and himself, that boat wouldn't even have made it that far. So I don't feel like the weight of the boat has anything to do with if he put her in it or not, because all the other factors of evidence that were in that boat, it wouldn't even gotten past the dock with all that weight all the way out into the bay if the dummy alone made it sink. So then you have to add in the anchors, you have to add in Scott's weight. Like, it just doesn't add up. And I keep hearing Ninette say, he wouldn't have known who was here that day when he was at the warehouse, and he wouldn't have known who was at the marina. If he frequented those places a lot, a lot of people can stock things out and see the time of day that's most busy, who comes and goes at certain times, what cars are there at certain times. So he could have been planning this out for a while and knowing, okay, this is the time and day that I'm least likely to get noticed. This is the time and day where I know there's nobody ever here at this warehouse. There's nobody ever here at this arena. I mean, I don't think this was he woke up and pulled off the perfect crime. I think this was definitely a premeditated, lengthy process. I don't think he just woke up in December and was like, well, I'm going to kill my wife. I think this was going on for a long time. So when Chris says, what's the odds and it's luck that you could pull off a perfect crime and clean up 4 crime scenes and not leave a trace of evidence? Now, I believe somebody could do that. I do. I think if he plotted and planned it long enough, he cleaned it up. and he just got away with it until he did. But I really just don't think the boat being a Christmas present to her dad has anything to do with it either. I think he bought that boat intentionally to take Lacey out to that bay. And that's why her parents never knew about it. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I used to own a boat. And I can tell you that my boat I kept in the water. And over the years that I owned the boat, I think I had to buy 2 different covers because they do get even just like when they're just from the sun and stuff, they do get worn out. But if you're using a brand new boat cover, first of all, I've also driven from Modesto to the San Francisco Bay. It's mainly freeway. It's not like, you're going to be, like causing a huge amount of wear and tear. The weather conditions, if I remember correctly, that Christmas Eve were cold for California, but not like something that would cause that boat to, if that boat cover or the straps to look so worn in the first hour they're used. So that to me is silly. Again, I'm also seeing the contradictions in them using they want to be very intentional in the language they're using as far as it being a shallow bottom boat, and how she'd have to be under the cover. Lacey was a petite woman. So even if she was under that cover, she could go unseen underneath the boat cover in the boat. Not to mention, I have a million times been on my dock and been on the dock, walked past boats, and never even thought to pay attention to what was inside another person's boat. Now, yes, I would notice a body, but if it's disguised, probably not. I also wanted to say the warehouse to me, first of all, it's somewhere that Scott frequented. The video that we saw, and this is 20 years later, that looked pretty private to me. I mean, it was in the back of the building. I mean, it didn't seem like there was a huge public presence in that area. Not to mention, it's Christmas Eve. How many people are at their warehouse at 10:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve? A very, very easy time to probably show up at your warehouse. And you know what? Who's to say? I mean, how long? I mean, if it was impossible to transfer a body from a house to a truck or a boat, then there'd hardly be any unsolved crimes. It happens all the time. People go undetected. We don't know that he didn't let's say it did happen on the 23rd. We don't know that he didn't take her body out to the truck or the truck in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. So yeah, how many people are going to, and even if he did do it that morning, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of ways he could have gone unnoticed with that. Yeah. I want to know, because I don't remember, was the inside of his truck completely forensically tested and the bed of the truck? Because how do we know he didn't put her in the back seat? There's so many parallels now that I watch this with, now that I look at this through the lens of having also experienced Chris Watts, because I do find a lot of similarities in the two. Mm-hmm. She was in the back seat of the truck. Yep. Was there forensic evidence of Shanann Watts found in Chris's truck? I don't know the answer to that. So I'd be curious to, know what forensic testing was done on the inside of Scott's truck. And also, I would argue that they keep talking about there were all of these different scenes and there's no forensic evidence. There's no forensic evidence. Well, first of all, Brian Koberger walked into a house. Yes, there was victim evidence, but he walked into a house and the only DNA that they found detectable of his was on a partial on the sheath. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and that was a brutal, I don't think, why would there be any forensic evidence in a strangulation? There's no blood. There's no, so any DNA they found in that home would be normal because she lived there. Yep. Anything they found in her bed. Mm-hmm. Was there forensic evidence found in Shanann Watts' bedroom? No, because she was strangled to death. And of course I'm just saying this allegedly, but I'm like, they're saying there's no forensic evidence in this. There's nothing. There's no hair. There's no blood. There's no DNA. Like, well, that's because depending on the way she was killed, there may not be.
Yeah.
Just like if she were wrapped in something and then moved from the truck to the boat, whatever. Why would there be then forensic evidence in the warehouse? And we don't know that she was transferred to 10 different places. She may have have gone from the truck to the boat, and that's it.
That's what I think. I think it's that simple.
There, is it possible that what they're saying has legs? Yeah, it's possible. Is it probable? Not from anything I've seen so far. I don't know. Those were just some of the things that I thought. And also the 14-foot, the shallow bottom boat, they kept putting emphasis on that. Yet really, which again, I want to say, I remember when Mark Geragos did this with his poor law clerk, and I hope that law clerk got a very lucrative job, because I'm sure he earned it, having to be put out on that boat on the San Francisco Bay, with, I'm sure, very strict instructions that this should work in the way that the defense wanted it to work.
Yeah.
And, he probably had a lot of motivating factors into making sure that, yep, it's not possible. Because you're working for you're a law clerk for one of the most, successful, rich, defense attorneys in the country.
Yeah.
And, nothing, a test being performed one time by a party that has invested interest in the outcome. I'm not shocked that it was not considered scientific. I mean, now had they used an independent, if they had used an independent lab to test the entire thing, and they had repeated it multiple times, as you do with most scientific testing, maybe then there would be some validity to the results if they coincided with what Mark Geragos is saying. But putting your law clerk out there, who's, I'm assuming a 20-year-old kid, who wants to impress his boss, I'm not shocked that he got the result he wanted.
I think James Cameron from Titanic needs to go out there, and because he works with the naval underwater people, and he's gone down 100 times to see the ship, and he tested the Jack and Rose theory. So I think they need to send him out there. But no,
I will say also a 14-foot shallow bottom boat is going to be less likely to tip than a bowed bottom boat. And also they're saying like two people, Lacey and Scott's weight on that. I mean, how many times have you seen two grown men on a fishing boat? That's not uncommon. Like there's nothing uncommon about that's not a tiny boat. Yes, I mean it's not a catamaran. It's not at all.
Yeah, but like you said, she's petite. She was petite.
She's petite, and it'd be easy to balance that out. And they're in a shallow, flat bottom boat, so it is more likely to stabilize the weight. And that's even if you take the cement blocks out of the situation. And with Scott's, strength and weight, you could easily remove, knock her or take her out of the boat without tipping the boat over. Yeah. In my opinion.
Yeah, and he's a seasoned fisherman, so he knows how to balance boats. He knows where to put the weight. He knows. I mean, it's just. Again, this is one of those things where I don't think the boat has relevance.
I don't either. I don't either, and nor do I. I've never thought that it actually has relevance as to whether she died on the 23rd or the 24th. Maybe she did. Maybe he didn't kill her until the morning of the 24th. Maybe she did get up and make those searches. Maybe she did watch the Today Show with Martha Stewart. Why does it matter? She's still dead. It doesn't change the timeline as far as we know. She talked to her mother the night before on the 23rd. We know that Scott showed up at the San Francisco Bay on Christmas Eve, and Lacey was never seen again after that day.
And don't forget,
if she did make it through the night, and she did, and I know that part of the reason the state theorizes that she died on the 23rd is because I believe the clothing she was wearing. I think you told me that one time when we were talking about this case, when we went to the panel, they matched kind of what she had been wearing on the 23rd. Am I correct?
The clothes that she was wearing the 23rd, that when she went to see her sister, was khakis
that matched
and a white shirt. Those are the clothes that they found in the hamper. I'm 99% sure.
So she had changed, because I do remember the defense saying, "Oh, well, she clearly went to bed because there was clothes in the hamper," and that was part of their whole thing about it not happening on the 23rd. And I will say that I don't think the prosecution did themselves any favors by putting weight on that being the 23rd. I think that they I think it's inconsequential if it was the 23rd or the 24th. Either way, we know sometime between this time and this time she died.
I think he did it in the middle of the night. I think he put her in the boat in the middle of the night. I think
it doesn't change the outcome.
Yeah, and I think he left in the morning with the truck and just went right out to the marina, and that would make it to where no one saw her if he did it in the nighttime. I mean, look at Shanann Watts, same thing. And they did find her DNA in that truck because her body released, fluids and whatnot. But with Lacey, they didn't. So my guess is he took her out in the middle of the night and put her in that boat, put the cover on, got up bright and early, jumped in that truck and left. It's that simple. Like, I don't know why they're overcomplicating it. And, well, I mean, I know he had to go to the warehouse. He put her in that boat or that truck in the middle of the night. He didn't do it in broad daylight. And if the boat was at the warehouse or he pulled up with the boat, I can't remember what they said. Like you said, on Christmas Eve, how likely are people going to be there? And two, if he goes there all the time, he knows what time people get there. It's a routine. So I don't think anybody would have seen him carrying Lacey's body, because I think he put her either in the boat or the truck in the middle of the night.
Well, what if she was wrapped up in something? Speculative, but what if she was wrapped up in something, and even if someone saw him carry her out there wrapped up, she was petite, and then 5 minutes later, they see him also then carrying wrapped up patio umbrellas out there. Your mind would immediately associate the two. Like, you're like, oh, nothing uncommon there. And then he's using those to cover, even if she had been wrapped in something. Yep. I don't know for certain. But again, I don't think it really matters, because, like I said, if everyone that's ever taken a body out of a house and moved it into a vehicle or a truck was seen by someone, we'd have no unsolved cases.
Yep.
But I think that I said those to me are just like facts that people get hung up on, and I don't think they actually matter. Now, yes, if the prosecution, I understand that the benefit for them in saying it was the 23rd is that can then dispel the stuff that, we hear about with some of the defense bringing up other people that think they may have seen her or whatever, because they saw a pregnant woman. They saw a white pregnant woman with a golden retriever in California.
Because that's such a rare, that's such a unicorn.
That's not a rarity.
No.
But, and I'm not making light of it at all, of course, because, what Lacey and Connor went through are hell. And, what all of them went through, or her family went through, is hell. And, and if Scott Peterson is innocent, he's gone through hell. I'm not seeing anything yet to prove that to me. But I also do have one interesting question that I've never heard an answer to. And because I also think people will talk about, was he lying about giving the boat to her dad? One, would that be an atypical type present for him to buy for his father-in-law? Like how much? I would assume that would have been something that Lacey and him planned on. Like, it's a larger purchase, right?
Yep. And why wouldn't he tell her?
What did they get what did they get Sharon that year? What did they get his parents that year? So I'm like, so if this big elaborate gift, was going to his father-in-law, let's just go off if Scott was telling the truth and it was for his father-in-law, did Lacey know about it? Because I would assume there'd be no reason she wouldn't, right? Like, why would you hide? And two, if he took the boat out on Christmas Eve and then was going to give it as a gift less than 12 hours later on the next day. Did he clean it? Were there things in the boat? Because, I mean, if you're going to present someone with a boat, are you going to like leave salt water, or are you going to leave like, the water from the bay all over it? Or did he come home and clean it? I've never heard that he did that. I've never heard that he cleaned the boat. So he's just going to give his father-in-law a dirty boat?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
We know someone cleaned the kitchen. We know someone cleaned the house because it smelled like bleach.
And don't forget, that morning he told people that he got up to go golfing first and decided it's too cold, so I'm going to go out on the bay, go fishing. Okay, so you can't golf, but you'll go out in the water with a breeze.
So he made that, so he made that decision last minute because of the weather.
Yeah.
However, we also know that you're the one that told me this, I think, when we were at the panel in Vegas, that he got that permit to go out on the bay for the 23rd and 24th. And I think you said he obtained it like on the 20th or 21st, which means...
it was the 20th he got it. And it was for the 23rd and 24th.
So, I mean, he had some incredible foresight to, have a last minute decision to go fishing, and just so it happened to have gotten the permit to go on the exact dates that he went on.
Yep. Yeah. So why would, if he gone golfing to begin with, if he had bought that license on the 20th? So yeah, that's a big hole in the story, but let's get back to it.
Much harder to weekend at Bernie's someone out on the golf course.
Sorry, that's funny. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's impossible for him to pull this off. I don't. So,
I mean, like I said, most criminals, when you say, for the first time, you couldn't have pulled this perfect crime off. I can think at the top of my head 5 criminals who, other than their stupid mistakes, would have gotten away with it. So
look at the John Bonet
Scott,
case.
it's just like a lot. Scott could be just like a lot of these people.
Yeah.
That's not unheard of at all. And it's not just dumb luck. It's all sorts of factors.
Well, think of this. If he bought that boat license on the 20th and didn't plan to use it to the 23rd, 24th, that's premeditated right there. So right. I think he's been plotting and planning this for months. That's me.
And again, what forensic evidence is there going to be if Lacey went to bed that night, had pizza, watched a movie, went to bed that night, woke up in the middle of the night with her husband on top of her, strangling her to death?
Or poisoning
Just
her.
like Chris Watts. Just like Chris Watts. It wouldn't leave any forensic evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so but why would the house smell like bleach, though? Why would he clean bleach? Why would he use bleach if there was no evidence?
You could. The bleach thing is never going to sway the case one way or another, because you could say, okay, they're having company Christmas morning. The entire family is coming over Christmas morning. They're hosting, so maybe they used bleach to clean. That's, if I'm the defense attorney, that's what I would say. That that was normal for them to, for Lacey to have, and while Scott was out at the bay, testing out the boat, Lacey was home, getting ready with, finishing up the nursery and cleaning for Christmas the next day because they were hosting.
All right,
I mean, most people, I get hyper anxiety and hyper fixate when I have to am having people over because I hate hosting. And so and I clean every little thing, and then I, overanalyze and overthink every little thing, which is why it's not fun to host. But, or was he cleaning up any signs of maybe him having to drag her off the bed onto a sheet, onto anything? I've always wondered if there were any missing bedding from the house, any missing, maybe he even bought something to use, a tarp. Maybe he did buy something. He had the permit to go out on the bay days before. What would have kept him from buying a tarp? That would have looked perfectly normal.
I don't think that was the first time he took that boat out on the marina either. I think he had taken it out before. He had plotted and planned where he was going to take her. And like I said, I told you before, I read Sharon Roach's book, For Lacey, one of the best books I ever read.
I'd like to read it.
And it was more of the perspective of their family, not what the media put out. And there were some things in there where if I remember correctly, there wasn't really any evidence in the house. Everything looked normal. There was no proof of a break-in, no proof of an attack, no proof of items left behind that weren't hers or things out of place, or it was just like she just went out to get coffee or something. So there was nothing in that. I don't think anything was taken off the bed. I think there was a tarp. I really do. I don't know why there would have been bleach unless she was cleaning and he was cleaning. But again, that's circumstantial because you don't really know why they were using it.
Right. So that's never going to make or break the case.
No.
But again, there was nothing other than the fact that in the Chris Watts case, he had removed the bedding. But you remember, he also anticipated going home. He would have taken more steps to disguise his actions had it not been for Nicole, or, the friend.
Yeah,
Can't remember her name.
Yep.
Done.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole was the girlfriend. I can't remember the Shanann's.
Shanann's best friend was Nicole. That's who checked on her that morning.
So because she came with the police.
Yeah.
So that's why there was no bedding left on, because he fully anticipated to come home and remake
fix it.
Bed.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just, I'm curious, were there any sheets missing from the linen closet, or was there a tarp? He could have gone anywhere and paid cash. He could have had a tarp in his warehouse.
Do you think it was possible if he dismembered her before he took her?
That I think then you would leave a lot more of a chance for
the blood and
for forensic evidence. Plus, if you're believing that he made the cement blocks, what would be the need of them? If you're dismembering, that to me would actually make it less likely that they would be effective.
That's true.
And you're also having to think about the fact that
you could drip blood anywhere.
You're dismembering your 8-month-old pregnant wife. So, chances are, I'm sure even if he didn't want Connor, chances are, he probably didn't want to dismember or, a 8-month pregnant woman.
He probably did strangle her. That would be my... Yeah. All right, let's get back to it.
Look at his little hair. He's all like sticking up. Yeah. Your Nana? Your Nana?
So pretty.
Your hair?
Lacey was just a loving, happy, generous, vivacious person. Lacey loves life. She loves people.
For family and friends. All painted this picture of this girl that was so looking forward to giving birth. And she was planning on the nursery that she was finishing the construction of and looking forward to being a mother.
And this is Lacey. Can you tell she's pregnant? Look at that stomach. It's really sticking out.
She was structured. She was organized. She had things planned out. She was social. And so when she comes up missing and there's no explanation to it, it signals there's something bad happened.
Modesto police begin the search for clues in the bizarre disappearance of 27-year-old Lacey Peterson.
There's so many inconsistencies.
Hold on, I'm gonna think of it before I forget. Don't forget he sold her car too. While all of this was going on, he sold her car. So keep that in the back of your mind. That might show up in the second half. But when we talked about this last time, I completely forgot. But why would you just sell your wife's car randomly if you thought she was coming home?
Didn't he also repurpose the nursery?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he started using it as a storage room.
But within weeks of clear and not only using it for storage, but got rid of the nursery items.
Yes, and
from my understanding, right?
Not only was he sold the car because I think they got it back. He was putting his house up for sale too. So if you anticipate your wife and 8-month-old, or your 8-month pregnant wife and a baby to come home, Why would you sell her car? Why would you put the house up for sale? And why would you start getting rid of the nursery? Ding, ding, ding. Those are, if I was a prosecutor, those are the top 3 things that I would focus on.
I'm telling you, there's a playbook out there that we haven't read, but apparently it starts out with, have every blessing that life can provide you, with a wonderful spouse, a loving family, in-laws that love you. Oh, but then get bored, have a pregnant wife, meet a girl, have an affair. Let's see what goes next. Continue the affair, live a double life.
While you're in Paris.
Plot and plan to murder your current wife, because she's just too much at this point.
Yeah.
Can't handle her anymore. She's getting annoying. And if you have 2 little children, let's just get rid of them too. Because the new girlfriend, you just want to be free. And
the new girlfriend had a kid too, so let's just take her kid.
She could, or could just want to go surfing like on the sand in California. But either way, you just get rid of them, and then within hours, you contact about having them withdrawn from school, and then you put the house on the market, and you sell the car. Definitely probably check into the life insurance. And then make
lots life
and
insurance,
lots.
By the way,
make lots of also texts and calls that are vague to the new girlfriend, just to kind of make sure she's still on board, just because you're like, well, hope I didn't do all of that, and then she's not into me anymore. And then because she'll even let me do some stuff my wife won't in our secret calculator app chat. I'm of course I'm going back and forth between Chris Watts and Scott Peterson.
I can relate to that a lot.
But I feel like the similarities in their behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm not using confirmation bias either in making Scott Peterson's connected to Chris's. There's
but it's
just
similar
parallels in it that it's hard to at least not acknowledge. I'm maybe Scott Peterson is innocent. I respect Chris Pixley. I think that the female detective was a lovely Ninette, I think is her name.
Ninette.
Yes. And and if I'm ever accused of a crime, Mark Geragos is not not necessarily, he's probably in the top 3 people I'd want to call.
Yeah, no, I told you this before. I respect his passion and his dedication to being a defense lawyer. Somebody has to do it, right? Like we said in the beginning, somebody has to do the job. Everybody's entitled to an attorney. And
without attorneys, our justice system,
it's just
no purpose.
It's just how he presented himself at CrimeCon. I just thought it was so unprofessional. But that's his character, but it doesn't mean he doesn't do a good job at what he does for a living. Like there's 2 separate, there's the person and then how good he does his job. He could be a good guy, he could be a bad guy, but it doesn't take away the fact that he is a good defense attorney. So I do want to respect that side, because I remember at CrimeCon when he said that he was getting death threats, he was getting bomb threats, and people took it out on him. But I have to agree with him when he says, this is my job, and I know that I'm going to he even admits, he's like, I know I'm going to get backlash for this, but this is my job. Right. So I do respect that, because if I was in that position, I need a really good defense attorney. So somebody has to do it. And I respect that, but just how he presented himself was what I didn't appreciate. That's it.
Right.
So.
I know. And I always try to play devil's advocate, because I know, of course, when he walked out and he was playing on his phone the whole time in the sweatpants, I was like, dude, you're the richest guy in this room, probably. You couldn't bother to put pants. But, again,
not even jeans and a nice shirt,
I'm like, you know what? He's been to CrimeCon before, but, when he went there last time, it was probably much smaller. He might not have expected there to be 3,000 people in that room.
I don't think
he might be a little socially, he might have been a little socially awkward and been like, plus, having been a part, I will say, and because I'm not sure if I told you this earlier or not, but, I had a conversation with Chris and Ninette after the panel later that evening.
I got to. Yeah.
Well, I just happened to run into them. And we were in a not not in the crime kind of area. We were just down in at Caesar's Palace, kind of over by Nobu, and they were standing there having a conversation, and I approached them and I said, I was at your panel today, and I said, I'll be honest, it's going to take a mountain of evidence to prove to me that Scott Peterson is innocent from what I know and what I feel confident about in this case. But I really did appreciate the professionalism that the two of them used, and the guts that it took for them to go on stage in front of 3,000 people, if that's how many were in the audience, and present a narrative or a case that they have to clearly, I believe, because they're also not naive or stupid. They know that they're walking onto a stage where many, many, many more than half of the people in that room are automatically thinking they're idiots or trash or wrong. They don't know what to expect. That takes guts.
Yeah, it does.
And I have respect for someone that can do that and do it in a respectful, professional manner. And even though I've never defended a convicted murderer, I have, been part of a docuseries that many would consider controversial. That would be, the catching their killer, the girls on the high bridge about Delphi. I've experienced, what it feels like to have people come judge you without even seeing something first, or to think that you feel a certain way just because you presented different sides of something, and made that reflect, almost like it reflected on your personal beliefs. When that's, I just don't think that's, I don't think that, I don't think that's fair to automatically, prejudge someone. And so I told Chris, I said, it's going to take a lot to convince me, but I am excited to watch the A&E special. I'm excited to see what evidence you have to present, and I will watch it with an open mind, and I will give it a fair review. So that's my goal, and it's I've yet to see anything that's changing my mind so far, but that's not to be disrespectful towards Chris Pixley.
No,
I just I'm seeing a lot of subjective, like cherry picking of information to kind of fit into a very narrative storytelling angle of nothing new. That I've seen nothing new so far. Have you?
No, nothing.
All right.
So let's get back to
Sorry,
it.
I didn't mean to.
I stopped it because I wanted to talk about that, because when they showed them taping off her car, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot they sold her car. So I think that's important.
So many small but important items that just don't add up, that I want to go back to day one of the investigation and examine everything from the beginning.
December 24th in the morning, Lacey was last seen by her husband, Scott, and we started an investigation on the 24th about 5:47 p.m.
After Lacey Peterson was reported missing, one of the first investigators to come to the Peterson home was Detective Burkini of the Modesto Police Department. One thing that's interesting to me about the early interactions on December 24th with Scott Peterson is how cooperative he was. He agreed to searches of his home, of his place of business, the warehouse where he worked, gave over his phone, he agreed to searches of his personal belongings.
It's a sign when somebody is cooperative with the police. But there are people who are guilty who will cooperate with the police. The reason for that is because they're guilty, they're afraid that if they don't cooperate, it'll make them look guilty. So as an investigator, you have to be careful to not read into it too much.
Narcissism
We're not being responsible if we don't ask the question, whether this is error in the course of the investigation or whether this is actual misconduct. Not only did Burkini focus on Scott Peterson from day one, but he did some highly unusual things in his investigation. One of the things that the LAIP filing shows is that Scott Peterson was asked on the evening of December 24th, 2002, as to whether or not he had weapons. He told the investigator that he did have weapons. He took him to a location in his home that he kept his hunting rifles locked up. He also told him that he had a .22 caliber pistol in the glove compartment of his car. Unbeknownst to Scott Peterson, that investigator, Detective Burkini, went to his truck and confiscated that .22 pistol.
To remove a piece of property, irrespective of whether it's a gun or anything else, to me is not a sanctioned investigative practice. The practice is either you get consent or you have a search warrant. And as an investigator, I thought, there's something I want to check out about this gun. Then I would have asked, do you mind if I book this gun? And then if Scott Peterson had said no, well, then I probably would have probable cause to get a search warrant.
I saw things in the back of his truck that first night that just didn't seem right.
Burkini was done with Scott from minute one. There's no doubt that he had an agenda.
Another problem is that the notes from Detective Burkini for December 24th, as well as his notes for December 25th, went missing. And he testified at trial that he destroyed those notes.
I cannot come up with a single explanation why any investigator would destroy notes, particularly on a high-stakes case like a missing person. I mean, it makes no sense to me. And I don't want to try to read into his rationale for doing it. It's just a bizarre thing to do.
And there's an inherent risk, is there not, that you have exculpatory evidence in there that's lost when police investigative notes or any materials are destroyed.
Not only is that a risk, but the other risk is also if that you sort of haphazardly as an investigator decide, well, I'm going to keep these notes, but I'm going to destroy those notes over there. Now the integrity of your investigation is being put into question, particularly when you go to trial, because it's bad optics.
Scott Peterson has no criminal record, and he has no history of violence.
Right. If there had been a history of Scott being violent and abusive towards Laci Peterson, that would point to a much higher likelihood that, in fact, he was the one who killed her.
It's this guy who has lived his entire life without any kind of violence. So just not in his makeup.
Just because you're having an affair doesn't make you a murderer. It makes you douchey, a very unlikable, unsympathetic character for sure. But being that and being a murderer are two different things. There was no evidence to suggest that Scott Peterson had killed his wife, other than the fact that he happened to be having an affair and he was her husband. That's essentially it.
Okay.
I don't know if I missed a tumbling class, but the mental gymnastics that I just feel like I experienced. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but okay.
I know, but
I will agree. You're not a douche. You're a douche doesn't mean you commit murder. Just because you cheat on your wife doesn't mean you commit murder. Yes.
Valid.
100% agree. But to say there's no evidence that he killed his wife other than he was having an affair, I mean, what is she talking about?
I don't know.
Yes, I understand that this is a case that I don't think anyone has ever argued that this was a case that DNA or forensics was going to solve, because again, if she was strangled, there isn't going to be that kind of evidence. This is one of those cases that if you take a circumstantial case, which many cases are proved through circumstantial evidence, and overwhelmingly convincingly so to a jury. But when you say that there's no evidence other than his affair, you're completely ignoring the timeline,
yes,
the location of his movements, the motive, which again doesn't have to be proven in a trial or defended, but you're ignoring his behavior and how atypical it was from his normal behavior and how it changed. And yes, he was trying to hide an affair. I get that.
Well,
but
we all do.
There's so many things that I think she just really did a disservice to the audience by saying there's no evidence, because there's no evidence if you don't want to believe there is.
Throw the affair out the window, and there's still evidence that points that he killed his wife.
If you take, I've said that I've always said that. Yeah, I do think that I think that, wanting, having that new hot, whatever, or as Mark Garagos would say, hussy, when you got your, pregnant, 8-month pregnant big wife at home, that still bothered me. But, I'm like, yes, remove Amber Frey from the situation altogether. It still doesn't, because she plays no part of the actions that, that we know about. Well, I'm just saying, even if she didn't exist, it doesn't change the movements and the actions that he took that day.
Nope.
And the difference in his behavior. It doesn't change any of it. It's Amber Frey is not the reason he ended up in the back of that car with his brother's ID on his way to Mexico, if that's where he was going.
With $5,000
with all the cash,
bleaching his hair and his goatee. And don't forget,
Amber Frey.
Don't forget, Aspen, that they didn't mention this yet, and it might come out in part 2. When he met Amber, he said he had lost his wife before Lacey ever even went missing.
Yep.
I lost my wife.
First Christmas without her.
And she thought,
wasn't it?
She thought that she died. So then he changed the story down the road with her and said, I never said she died. It's conflicting because he already he knew this was going to happen. So again, throw Amber out the window. He could have told this to anybody.
Right. And let's just say, and I also want to go back to something that Chris Pixley has mentioned several times about Scott's behavior being bold. I think I think you would probably describe it as arrogant. I think a lot of people would probably describe his behavior as arrogant, cocky
and bold. Yeah. Risky.
But, I'll use bold. I'm going to use the word bold to describe Scott Peterson's behavior. And I would say that, yes, would it be bold to take your wife out and put her under the cover of your boat and transport her and then tie her down with weights in the San Francisco Bay and think you're going to get away with it? Yep, that's bold. Is it bold to have an open affair in the same town that you live in with your wife and almost born child? Or no, well, close by. But he voluntarily posed for pictures with his girlfriend while he had a pregnant wife at home. There are so many examples of him being bold.
Like somebody I know.
He was at the vigil. He was at the vigil for his missing wife and child.
Yep.
And pretended to be at the Eiffel Tower on New Year's Eve in Paris, to the point where he even was like, it's loud here. It's almost midnight. It's beautiful here in Paris. And the whole time he's off on the side of the vigil for his wife and dead baby.
And Lacey's mom noticed that there. Yeah. She watched him do that.
That is the epitome of bold. He then went to the police and said they had a wonderful relationship. He'd handed over his phone, never thinking that they were going to find out about Amber Frey, and they didn't find her from his phone.
She came forward.
It wasn't until she came forward. And But I mean, he was so bold that he then thought he was going to get away with that scot-free, that
But
she wasn't even going to see it. And then when he did, he was so bold he didn't think she would turn him in. He was so bold that he continued to talk to Amber Fry while she was recording it for the police. He was then so bold as to agree to a polygraph. And then, just like most bold people do,
it's called master manipulation. He really
pushed him
thought.
to shove. But remember, it wasn't his fault.
Well, no, it never is.
His dad didn't want him to take that polygraph. He's so bold. He wanted to do it. Remember?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, there are countless examples of Scott Peterson's boldness.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to, is like Lacey's mother and father, the whole family loved Scott.
Yeah,
they themselves said, it was a fairy tale. They thought Lacey had met her prince. They were all looking forward to Connor's birth. And almost immediately, they started to notice changes and differences in the behavior of their son-in-law, who they loved.
Read the book for Lacey, and there is a part in there where Sharon talks about that. Yeah.
And so, again, you take Amber Fry out of the equation altogether. So, like she said, the only evidence about him killing his wife is the affair. When the people that are the closest to you in the world start to notice differences in your behavior, your attitude, your character, you're uncomfortable all the time, your demeanor.
Why dye your hair?
That again, that's not going to, I would not send someone to death row for that fact alone. But when you put all of these things together, it builds a circumstantial case. And, something that Nicholas McClellan in the Delphi case, explained is that, yes, when you take one fact and you put it by itself, it might not prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But when you take the totality of evidence in a circumstantial case and you present that to a jury,
and lay it out like a story,
the jury's able to look at it, piece by piece. Yes, each piece is important. But when there's so many pieces that then fit, and there's no contradiction in them, like they all lead to the same conclusion. That to me is me just spending 10 minutes trying to disprove why she said there's no evidence that he could have killed his wife other than having an affair.
That's bad.
Because you can remove Amber Fry from the scenario altogether.
And
just like I think you can remove.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It does not change the totality of evidence.
Police have not been able to rule out Scott as a possible suspect.
The shocking news of Scott's affair splits two families.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, there's nothing. Thank you.
When was the moment you knew Scott Peterson was your man?
First day I had a gut feeling that something isn't right.
From the jump, police were suspicious of Scott, and they have justified those suspicions on the grounds of his demeanor.
All along, he had a very nonchalant attitude with me.
They were suggesting that his behavior was not the behavior of a grieving or panicked husband whose wife has gone missing.
You have no idea where this is. It was just a lot of things that added up that said to me, I better talk to this guy with a tape recorder running.
Scott was a person of interest from the start because he didn't do all the things that we asked him to do. And of course, there was a stark contrast in Scott's behavior with everybody else that was so close to Lacey.
The Los Angeles Innocence Project argues that the police are conducting an investigation that is not a missing person investigation, but a death investigation, and they are focused with tunnel vision on Scott Peterson right out of the gate.
Lead Detective Craig Grogan turns up the heat on Scott Peterson.
I'm not telling you that there's anything that's pointing any direction right now other than you, Scott.
They were determined to get a conviction. They had tunnel vision that it was Scott to the exclusion of any logical, rational explanation otherwise.
We're on our way to meet with Mark Godsey. Mark is a former federal prosecutor, and he is now one of the co-founders of the Ohio Innocence Project. Mark Godsey, I think, may be one of the people who can best speak to this idea that investigators, and for that matter, prosecutors, can very quickly be caught up in one narrative and the impact that that has on their ability to look objectively at the remaining evidence as it comes in.
With the Scott Peterson case, I was very much like the member of the public. At the time, I thought he was guilty. It didn't occur to me, at least, that he was innocent. But I wasn't there. And guess what? Neither was the judge, neither were the prosecutors, neither were the detectives.
The idea that the investigators had on the first day was that Peterson's our guy.
That's crazy, right? You can't know that quickly.
But how quickly can the investigators get caught up in tunnel vision?
Very quickly. It's not because they're bad people saying, I think I want to convict an innocent person. It's because they're good people who see themselves playing a crucial role in protecting the public.
We've taken the entire focus of the department. If not 99, 100% of the investigation unit is out currently working on this case.
And the more high profile it is, the pressure it is to solve the case because of the media attention. And so that first thing comes in that suggests that somebody did it. And boy, that's the best news I've heard all day. It's human nature. You're going to roll with it, particularly if the evidence is weak. And then you start ignoring signs and evidence that start coming in and start pointing the other way. And you just see that repeatedly in this case.
This case is starting out in the press, and he's already guilty.
He is such a despised individual in the public's eye.
This was a nationally covered case. You couldn't escape it. And so because of the media coverage, there was a lot more dramatization that led to roles being played. And Scott was definitely the bad guy.
The way I look at it, he's guilty 100%.
Confirmation bias is the human tendency to interpret information in a way that confirms our pre-existing belief. Because they're coming in with this default that it's probably the husband and somebody close to her. That's what their experience tells them statistically.
Before they've seen any of the evidence.
Absolutely.
Have you taken a polygraph test? What about the allegations of a girlfriend?
So when you look at the Peterson case, it's clear that they latched onto his demeanor.
I don't really care what those people out there think.
Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is casual about it?
Yeah, we don't know. No one knows our relationship but us.
We don't know what Scott Peterson was thinking. Maybe he was in shock. Maybe he wasn't that upset. Maybe he's a jerk. There's a million things that might have contributed to his demeanor. And the demeanor evidence is frequently used because the evidence is weak. The prosecutor will get up and say, like, look at his demeanor. That's not how somebody acts who just lost their wife. And that sometimes it seems very compelling to the jury, but human beings are about 54% accurate, so barely better than a coin flip at determining whether someone is telling the truth or not.
He's lying to her about being on business while a community prayer vigil is being prepared for his then missing wife, Lacey.
Okay.
I'm near the Eiffel Tower.
From your perspective, why is the Scott Peterson case so important?
It's a microcosm of what goes on everywhere. You see them consistently ignoring evidence that contradicts their theory and sort of shaping it to fit their theory. Cops are trained to believe that they can make up their mind very early on. This person's lying. It's baked into the system. They don't like his demeanor. They don't like the way he's acting. They're making up their mind pretty early. This is probably our guy. There was not enough evidence to make that conclusion.
What comes of a conversation like the one we had with Professor Godsey is that we have to be open to the possibility that there are many wrongfully convicted people who, because of our biases, are sitting behind bars. And of course, the question here is whether Scott Peterson is one of those men. I'm starting to get a feeling that the investigation was infected by bias and tunnel vision. That kind of conduct is enough to turn the tide of the case.
I want to interject here real quick. This kind of reminds me of John Bonet's case, where immediately the public, the prosecutors, everybody in the world, because that was a mass frenzy of a case, everybody immediately assumed it was John and Patsy Ramsey and Burke. And over the years, because that case is one that I can talk about for days, but I've done so much research on that and I've read so many books because I'm very open-minded. I want to read both sides of the evidence. I want to hear both sides of the prosecutor and the defense. So
Same.
It's kind of
Always.
like Scott. I mean, they're saying confirmation bias. I mean, I think that applies more to the Ramsey family rather than Scott. Yes, the media, and Joe Petito he will stand on this. The media plays a role, the biggest crucial role on what they want us to see, what they want us to hear, and what they want us to piece together. It's the media's fault to get headlines. They don't care if it's leaked. They don't care if it's not true. They don't care if it hurts other, the family of the victim. It all starts with the media. So if there is confirmation bias, I think that's where it starts. I think, the media's going to put out what they want, but then he's saying, well, everybody from the beginning just immediately tunnel vision saying that it's Scott. Okay, I get that. I can agree with that to an extent because of the media, but not because they automatically just said, well, like my shirt, the husband did it. There's so much evidence leading up to Lacey disappearing that I don't care if you're tunnel visioned or not. It's right in front of you. And I remember this being all over magazines, the tabloids, the news. I mean, my grandma had this on CNN every single night with Larry King or Nancy Grace, and you couldn't escape it. You could not escape this case. It was as big as OJ. It was as big as John Bonet. And Scott's, like you said just in our last break, Scott's actions, throw the affair out the window, led everything up to this point where she disappeared. Now, if you took all his actions and threw those out the window and he only had Amber, I could kind of see that maybe he didn't do it. But because of all his premeditated steps to get there and actions and body language and demeanor and character and facial expressions and, he gave Brokini access. Okay, here's my weapons, because we don't think he used weapons on her. We think he used his hands. So, okay, of course, take the guns because there's no evidence there. Look in my truck because there's no evidence there. And Lacey's in my truck all the time. So, of course, you're going to find her DNA. I don't understand how it can be confirmation bias, but you can step in here and explain that. I think it all starts with the media, but it doesn't negate the fact of all the actions he took to show us 99% he probably did it. That's all I want to say.
I have very strong opinions about this. And I feel like, which, I will say, A&E, thank you so much for flashing the definition of confirmation bias on the screen several times, just in case we weren't paying attention and we needed to remember what confirmation bias is. I would say that what I just witnessed was a bold example of compounding information. You know what? I think we just witnessed a good example of confirmation bias, because there's a very, very, very stark difference between having a hypothesis. Let's take a crime out of this. Let's say you believe that you could create a antibiotic that would revolutionize the entire healthcare world. You are going to start your theory with a hypothesis. you then test that hypothesis. If throughout the testing of that hypothesis, you do not receive the results that you had anticipated or that you were following or investigating, your hypothesis is disproven. And now to go back to this being a crime, long before Scott Peterson, long before it's not like it's a new thing that when, and I'd love for you to find an investigator that would disagree with this. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a lawyer. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once because everything else was booked. But I will say it's typical. You start an investigation from the inside out. And yes, I will say, the reason that they did, and I feel like they did this very intentionally. I feel like they laid out that so many people are wrongly convicted. True. Absolutely true. There's confirmation bias and there's tunnel vision in so many investigations. Not all police officers get it right. And sometimes ego gets in the way. Sometimes people do form an opinion and it doesn't matter whether the facts follow the evidence. They keep going with it.
Yeah.
That's why we have the judicial system. I apparently need the English language, but judicial system that we do is to have checks and balances in place for those types of things. So, if you have a woman that goes missing, you're going to probably speak to the people closest to her first.
Yeah.
The last person to have seen her, which in this case, to our knowledge, was her husband.
Yep.
If they then pick up on inconsistencies or things in his demeanor, things in the things he's saying that are not consistent or that do not line up with other things that people in her family are saying, that is going to then tell you, if I'm an investigator, it's going to tell me, okay, this, let keep going down this avenue. That doesn't mean you have tunnel vision. It means you're following the leads and the investigative tools that you're using. And as long as the things that you're looking into all continue to point in that direction, it's not tunnel vision or confirmation bias to continue investigating that avenue. It is not confirmation bias to look into someone, find inconsistencies, dig deeper, find more inconsistencies, find lies, find omissions, find geographical oddities in their behavior. All of the things that we can say were evidence in this case are all things that if I'm an investigator, I'm going to continue looking into Scott Peterson. That's not confirmation bias. Confirmation bias would be if you decide Scott Peterson is innocent and you are going to only use information that you want to use without giving any details because you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Such as saying, well, this new science means that, we don't know, she could have been alive for days after the 24th, but she shouldn't have popped out of the water where she did. You're creating data that is being cherry picked from to get any result in any program. I don't care if it's in 2002 or 2026. You have to input information into whatever program you are using to then calculate the result that you get. The prosecution, they used the location that Scott went and, and all of the wind and the tidal patterns from that day until April when she was found. So those are things that, the hypothesis they were going off of, and it lined up with where she came out of the water. The defense is now saying, we don't know when she went in the water, but she couldn't have popped up where she popped up because that means Scott didn't do it.
Right.
That means to get that result, they're having to put some, I mean, if they're putting the 24th in the new science that they're using to get that theory, then yes, that is an inconsistency, and that is something that needs to be looked into. But how do you say in one sentence, we don't know when she went in the water, and then two, say she absolutely couldn't have popped up where she did if Scott was in the area he was fishing? I mean, you can't, that's not science. You can't get that result without putting in knowing all of the factors.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
So they clearly had to put something into that program to get the result that they got. Mm-hmm. Just like, the whole, it's impossible to not tip the boat over. Yes, you did a scientific, demonstration to get the result that you wanted.
Yeah. Without showing us.
And does law enforcement, do investigators do that as well? Yes, but guess what? That's why a defense attorney is going to present an expert that's going to shoot that down. That's why they have separate experts. And just like I would love to see the data that they're using for this new science. Because I'm a dork and I would want to read it. I would want to read the chart. I'm not a scientist. I would love to look with my own eyes to see what information they put into that program to get that result.
I agree. Yep.
Because that's what they're forming this whole thing on. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
For the first time, the jury got to hear Scott Peterson speak in a taped interrogation with Detective Al Brocchini.
One of the things that was presented as part of the state's case at trial was the custodial interrogation of Scott Peterson the same day that his wife went missing.
Just tell me about the morning. Lacey got up and went and assumed that she has cereal for breakfast. She eats right when she wakes up, otherwise she gets sick because she's pregnant.
The state argued that the portions of that...
These are things that 20 years watching this case are little things that are now popping out. I wish they could have tested her digestional tract at some point if it wasn't, months later. Like if it was immediate and let's say she wasn't in the water and they found her somewhere else, it would have been interesting to see if she had fragments of cereal in her stomach. That's what my mind goes to, because once again, it brings me back to the John Benet Ramsey case where they found pineapple in her stomach. Does it solve and say that this is what happened? But it could debunk, his testimony here of, okay, well, no, she didn't have cereal. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. Same if there's pizza. Same if the most recent thing had been pizza. Yeah, again, to me, it's inconsequential whether it was the 23rd or 24th.
Yep.
A grieving husband who was concerned at the disappearance of his wife, but instead that it was a man who lacked any affect.
At times, he leaned back in his chair with his hands in his pocket. He even took a cell phone call.
Amy, what's going on?
What the public hasn't been made aware of is the fact that that phone call was coming in from Lacey's sister, Amy.
Sister-in-law.
What the state did was roll out very limited pieces of Scott's on-camera interview, and his answers and responses just seemed out of line with the gravity of the circumstances.
When did you realize you were going to go fishing? Oh, that was a morning decision. It's either go morning, so like off at the club or.
Remember, he bought that fishing license on December 20th for December 3rd and December 24th. That he's telling Brocchini that he decided to go that morning. So just keep that in mind.
Really quickly, I was going to say, I'm not. I don't take I don't take it. Everyone reacts very differently in a situation. I can laugh in awkward situations. Like I'm not the person you want to sit next to at a funeral because I could be emotionally wrecked, but like I will nervously laugh.
Same.
And so I don't ever, I don't ever damn someone for the fact that he's holding, it looks like a coffee mug. he clearly probably had a very busy night the night before and morning that day, and it's 12 something at night now on Christmas Day. And again, taking the phone call from the sister-in-law, again, he was with the police for hours.
Yep. You're gonna start
before this,
acting
so
weird.
it doesn't seem odd to me at all that he probably got a lot of phone calls in those hours. His wife's missing.
Yep.
Everyone still loves him. Everyone's still in her family, and they know he's with the police. So he might have information they're not getting yet, because he's there being, spoken to. I wouldn't say interrogated even, but and I also don't think it would be uncommon that they would interview him several times on that initial day. Take us to your warehouse. Take us here. Take us about your day. Show us where Lacey would go. Those are normal things you do in a missing person investigation in the first few hours. What was Lacey's normal pattern of behavior? Show us where she would walk the dog. Show us where you were. And they probably did talk and interview him throughout that entire process. So, maybe they continued to interview him because maybe his answers weren't consistently. To my knowledge, this was the first one that was recorded that we at least have publicly, correct? But it wasn't the first.
It wasn't the first interview, but it was the one that they showed us.
Yeah, this is the first one that we saw recorded publicly.
Yes.
So I'm, like I said, I assume they'd been talking to him for hours before this in several occasions.
And and even if you're guilty or not, you're going to get exhausted. You're going to get mentally fried. And they do that on purpose to see if you're going to, switch up anything in your stories. And sometimes they exhaust you and they exhaust you and they exhaust you until you just say, and there are people who have done like, yes, I just did it, because they're just so tired. They just want to get out of the room. And I've seen that on multiple cases. You've seen that before. So and I'm not saying he's innocent, but I can't at this point say he's guilty, but he's probably, if he didn't do what they said he did, he's probably exhausted, and he's not going to act the way that we would think he should act. You know what I mean?
And guilty or innocent, if you have a long pattern of bold behavior, that a lot of times can go hand in hand with, you want to be the good guy, because you really, one thing that, every narcissist that I've ever encountered in my life, and lots of the narcissistic murderers that I've studied and covered on cases, they want to be liked. They almost want to be, they want to help. They want to be the good guy. They want everyone to love them. They don't want anyone to think bad of them. They want to be buddy with everyone. They're just a, charming guy, and that's usually their downfall too, because that's where they slip up and they don't even realize they're slipping up, because their boldness gets in the way of them realizing they're being inconsistent.
Yes. So,
I even, can see this demeanor as him being like, no, I'm just this good guy that,
he's chill.
I'm just, I have nothing to hide. Mm-hmm. Look how relaxed and nonchalant I am. I just want to find my wife.
Yep. Well, they tell themselves lies and they believe it too. So if he's such a manipulator and a narcissist, he can calm himself down and just be like, like this, like, I didn't do it, because he's so confident in his own cockiness that he's just like, prove me wrong. You know what I mean?
And he didn't have to worry about his girlfriend interfering during these days because he was in Europe.
Yeah. Yep.
So again, premeditation to not have her in the midst of it all. She's not going to be calling and bothering him when he's being interviewed by the police, because you know what? Guess what time it is in Europe? It's 5 a.m. Oh no, wait, they're in California, so it's 8 a. It's just now 8 a.m. probably in Paris at this time.
Seemed too cold to wake up with the glove, so yeah.
When the state argues that Scott Peterson isn't acting like a grieved husband who's worried about the disappearance of his wife, they are leaving out important facts about the number of hours that this man spent answering questions before he actually went on camera. Peterson reports that in the day of her disappearance, he was interrogated 4 separate times, and it was only the 4th time at the station on camera that the rest of us have been able to see. Detectives met with Scott at the home and they went with Scott to his warehouse. Scott Peterson says police drove him around for hours, peppering him with questions to the point of exhaustion. Would it have made sense to take a suspect, asking the same questions over and over again, taking them around to different locations and so forth?
Back in the early 2000s, in any kind of high-stakes case, it was not unusual for detectives to conduct lengthy, multiple interviews of a person that they maybe thought was the suspect. A person in the room, the presumption was...
I just want to say really quickly, I don't think having someone take you through the steps of their day or retrace where their wife may have gone is making them endure lengthy interrogations. I mean, they just had him driving around to the places that they would do the same thing today. And
they're retracing steps, yeah.
And just like today, they would have conversations throughout that process.
Yes.
That is not, the language she's using is very intentional, you know, and like I said, I've seen this having been in the producing world, like, you know, you have to pick up on their choice of language because, you know, having someone take you through their day and tell you their events and asking them questions regarding their day and their wife's behavior or her patterns is not a lengthy interview or interrogation.
No, and they're doing that on purpose because they have to lay out a storyline. So why wouldn't you want to walk with him throughout his day? I mean, that's
right. They don't have him handcuffed to a table with a light bulb above his head, you know, for 12 hours.
No.
The dude's relaxed with a hand.
I think I read somewhere. When did I read? I don't know if it was in the book or if it was on another documentary that they got him McDonald's or something.
No, that was the arrest. No, that was literally moments after they told him that they recovered Connor and Lacey's body and that they confirmed it was them. He wanted In and Out and he wanted I remember his order even. But it wasn't during this time. It was literally when like an hour after they confirmed that was his dead child and wife.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. All right.
And he was like, "Can we get?"
He's the one.
What?
And he was like, "Can we get In and Out?"
Yeah, it was something. I remember watching something. I don't know if it. I think it's the Lacey Peterson documentary on Netflix is where I saw that. I think that's where it's at.
What the Los Angeles Innocence Project has pointed out is that by the time Scott got into his custodial interrogation at the police office in front of the camera, the guy was so exhausted and tired of the same questions over and over again that he lacked the affect and emotion that he would have had spontaneously.
You have no idea where this is. I have a couple concerns.
When it came to Scott, of course, always polite to deal with, always easy to talk to. But Scott's cooperation level was always a little bit short of 100%.
Peterson's comments and behavior have put him under the microscope from the very beginning.
Scott Peterson may be his own worst enemy.
When I say Scott Peterson's cooperation with the police is significant, what am I talking about? Well, he agreed to multiple interviews on the day of her disappearance.
Did you check neighbors?
I did.
Who'd you leave the note with?
Aaron Service.
What concerns me the most is the fact that your dog came home with a leash on. That bothers me. I mean,
No question.
yeah.
What concerns me most is doing anything I can to further progress.
I appreciate that.
Peterson also agreed to turn over to them all of his devices, the phones and computers. He agreed to give them a lie detector test.
Just to eliminate you as a suspect, would you be willing to take a polygraph test?
For a suspect to say right out of the get-go, sure, I'll take a lie detector test, is a good sign.
They're accurate, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not nothing that can be used against you, but yeah, I believe they're accurate.
No, I'm certainly willing.
Nothing is an absolute, but particularly because most people really believe that the test is infallible. To agree to go through that process is a much stronger indicator that this is a person who has nothing to hide.
Later on, his father told him, I'm not comfortable with you taking a lie detector test. So no polygraph was ever administered.
And there's the question of why Scott Peterson would not think that the police would discover that he was having an affair.
You guys haven't had any problems, marriage problems. Everything's good. Mm-hmm.
It's reasonable to argue that the reason they didn't tell him he was having an affair was it's just another fact that would have led them to believe that they've got their man and stopped looking for. There's also the more common human explanation that when we're doing something wrong, we're not quick to admit it.
Do you have any questions?
No, I mean, I've asked you a couple times what to do. So I have the answers to that. So what are we going to go do?
There's not a lot more we can do right now, other than canvas.
But we can do a lot.
The fact that Scott Peterson cooperated with the police extensively on the day of his wife's disappearance and in the days that followed lays the groundwork for a pretty decent argument that this guy was doing everything he could to find his wife. Sole defendant. They believed that this was a premeditated crime, and they treated it that way out of the gate.
Scott says he last saw his missing wife, Lacey, on Christmas Eve when he left to go fishing.
Police yesterday released photos of his pickup truck and boat in the hopes that someone may have spotted it.
The theory of the boat is that he had bought it and that it was part of his master plan to go dispose of the body. And it just never made any sense.
So if you got to about 5 minutes to 1, you get your boat in, how long do you think you stayed in the water?
Felt like an hour and a half or so.
About 2 weeks before Lacey Peterson went missing, Scott purchased a 14-foot aluminum fishing boat. The prosecution's position at trial was that Scott Peterson got the boat with the express purpose of murdering his wife and using the boat to deposit her body in the San Francisco Bay.
He keeps the boat quiet from everybody. He doesn't tell anybody that he bought the boat. It seemed to us that there was some premeditation going on.
But Scott Peterson said he was taking the boat out to test it and try it out because he had purchased that boat for his father-in-law and it was going to be a Christmas gift. The prosecution throughout the trial, they argued to the jury that the purchase of the boat absolutely was not known to Lacey.
Nobody knew Scott had bought a boat, and we asked various members from the Peterson family and the Rocha family. Nobody knew about it.
But just in 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project has found handwritten notes that were in the Petersons' home that were not turned over to the defense. The notes have the phone numbers of local marine supply stores written on them. And the LAIP has looked to a forensic document examiner, handwriting expert, Dr. Linton Muhammad, because they believe that it's Lacey's, not Scott's, handwriting on those notes that were found in the home. If true, that means that she was not only aware of the boat, but that she participated in the purchase of accessories for the boat. And if she knew about Scott's boat, the whole argument at the time of trial that he premeditated her murder and purchased a boat in order to carry out the disposal of the body is false. I want to stress test this with an independent handwriting examiner who can tell us whether or not this is Lacey Peterson's handwriting.
I began my career with the United States Secret Service. I completed a 2.5-year training program there under the tutelage of experienced examiners.
I'm wondering if you'll just show me what you see and how you go about your analysis.
So after I look at the question document, I'm now looking at the known sample set. So first we have Scott Peterson's sample set.
And these are pages from a diary?
Yes. Do you notice anything particular about the writing style of all the entries in the journal?
He prints.
Block print the entire time. We don't see lowercase style of printing, which is what we do see on the question document. So the style of writing is inconsistent with his known writing. Now, does that mean that he did not write the document? No. It may mean that we just don't have that particular style of writing represented in his known sample set. We really only have a few letters that are comparable. The R that's represented in the question document on Richard, the loop is very narrow. It meets in the middle. In the known writing, that loop of the R is usually very wide and round. The other is the B. You have that little tail at the very bottom of both B's. You don't see that in his writing here. There's not a lot of similar features, and the ones that are very general in nature. The conclusion that was rendered by the expert in this particular case was that it is probable that Scott Peterson did not write the question material seen on these Post-it notes. And I would agree with his conclusions.
When I look at all of these entries in his daily journal, they're all very neatly within the lines, written in small block print, very legibly. Does that say anything about Scott Peterson's personality?
A lot of people think that we can determine personality from handwriting, but there's no science behind that.
Now, the next thing that you did is compare the question document to the samples of Lacey Peterson's handwriting.
So when we look at the known samples for Lacey Peterson, we have a couple of lists with handprinting material. We also have a calendar with a lot of handwritten material as well. So her writing style is a print style using upper and lower case. Some of the features I noticed was that the I is smaller than the C in the question document. When we look at Lacey's writing, you see that I is consistently smaller than the C. The other is that the C and the H in the question document are connected. And when you look at Lacey's handwriting, that CH combination is oftentimes connected. So that would be another similarity.
What do you see in this evidence?
Based on the evidence submitted, I would have arrived at the same conclusion, that Lacey Peterson probably wrote the question material on the Post-its.
The comparisons that Jennifer was able to make was extraordinary. It really adds to the credibility of the Los Angeles Innocence Project's argument that her handwriting proves she had knowledge of Scott Peterson's boat. And it shoots a big hole in the prosecution's theory of the case. The prosecution has a theory that Lacey Peterson was calling marine supply stores to buy real marine supplies as part of the nautical theme that she had for Connor's nursery room. But these are not notes where she wanted to buy some small rubber duckies. These are notes where she's pricing out a live anchor. And that's not something that you're going to hang over the baby's crib. The Los Angeles Innocence Project makes the argument that this is evidence of the fact that she knew about Scott's boat. Therefore, Scott's boat is unlikely to be part of a premeditated murder plot.
If Lacey knows about the boat, that is critical evidence as concerns the Innocence Project of undercutting the prosecution's theory, and that violated Scott's right to due process and a fair trial.
It becomes virtually impossible for Scott Peterson to get due process because the defense wasn't aware of these Post-it notes until 2024.
It was clear to me that she did know about the boat. The PD deep sixed everything they could that wasn't consistent with Scott being the culprit. They were not going to be deterred.
Presented testimony.
How does Lacey knowing about the boat have anything to do with if he took her life or not? Because, again, if he bought this for her dad and she's helping him buy the accessories, so to speak, for that boat, and it was a gift, of course she's not going to ruin the surprise to her parents. Because let's say it was a present for both her parents. They're both going to use it. Why would she tell her mom? I mean, okay, go back to the book. That book for Lacey really ties up a lot of this stuff. She told her mom everything. Like, there was nothing that she'd never told her mom. I think that the boat, in Scott's mind, was a gift. That's what he told the cops, to her dad. But I think he bought this boat and told Lacey, and maybe Lacey just didn't think to tell her parents that they were getting a boat. Maybe not until they actually got the boat. Maybe she wanted to surprise them and say, hey, we got a boat. We can all go fishing. I don't know. But I don't think there's any relevance to Lacey knowing about the boat or not that led to her death. Okay, we see the Post-it notes. That's the first evidence right there that I never knew about. And obviously they said they were never released until 2024. But I still don't see how that can say, oh, Scott didn't do it. I mean, it's his boat. Maybe he did tell her it was a gift. And they just both wanted to surprise her dad. I don't know, but from the book, she told her mom everything. So if she told her mom, and the mom obviously isn't going to ruin the surprise for the Christmas present, I think this was...
I can see why you wouldn't tell her mom about a Christmas present, though. I mean...
I don't know. There's something missing from that. There's something, like, something just doesn't line up. If she knew about the boat, I think she would have told Sharon. But...
unless it was a surprise for them.
From both of them. And Scott's leaving that part out.
They're doing the nursery in a nautical theme. You know, well, I don't think his intention on buying the boat was ever to give it to his father-in-law.
No, I don't
Again,
either, but that's what he's telling the police.
I would like to know if he washed the boat. Because if he's giving it to him the next day, did he clean the boat after he tested it out? But if Lacey did know about it, why it doesn't change anything. It's very confusing. I mean, that's because it's mental gymnastics that you have to say because Lacey, may have known about the boat. That means it couldn't have been premeditated, and Scott is innocent. Now, I will say it was probably, I don't know why the prosecution would have put a lot of emphasis on the fact that she didn't know about the boat, other than maybe they just went off of the evidence they could prove, and they couldn't prove this handwriting thing at the time. And so they might not have even analyzed the handwriting. I guarantee you there are ample amounts of samples of Scott's writing in the last 20 years, because I don't think there's been any shortage of men and women that have written him in prison that he's written back. But again, I don't think it matters, because even if Lacey knew that her husband bought a boat, and maybe he didn't tell her about it at first, maybe she found out about it, or maybe he told her because it's a big purchase. They had money. They didn't have that much money. Yeah. They were just starting out. So that would be a purchase where it would be hard to hide that from your spouse. Granted, he is bold, so we know he is able to hide things. Lacey, maybe it was something they used both their money for, and maybe the reasoning he gave her was that it was going to be a present for her dad, and that was going to be something that maybe him and Connor, when he got older, and Lacey's dad could all go do together. Grandpa, son-in-law, and little boy fishing. What a good guy he is. When in reality, he's like, well, she's going to know about this boat, so I got to give her a reason. Doesn't mean, and Lacey might have known about the boat, doesn't mean she knew she was going to end up dead in it.
No, I don't. I agree with you on that. But something is eating at me that she would have told her mom.
It doesn't mean that I expect someone's going to use to kill me.
No. But that leaves the plot hole that in my stomach, because I read this book, I've heard her mom talk. Lacey told her mom everything. So if it's something that they were doing for her dad and for Scott and Connor, she would have been excited to tell her mom. So why didn't she tell Sharon? And that, I feel like that right there is the missing piece. Why didn't she tell her mom?
I don't don't see the importance on that you do, but I'm not invalidating that. I'm just saying that, like I tell my mother everything, but it's also a broad thing to say. I mean, Sharon also might have thought Lacey told her everything. Lacey might not have told her everything. Sharon's giving, I mean, is there any way to know whether Lacey actually told her everything? No. Because, and Sharon also thought that Scott was a wonderful guy. We don't know what actually happens behind closed doors in anyone's home. So someone might think that their daughter shares everything with them. But I guarantee you, there's parts of her life she didn't tell her mom about.
The only reason why I keep bringing that up is because
and you understand this. There are parts of, especially when it comes to relationships, there are always parts that even the people that we are the very closest to in the world that we tell everything to, that we don't tell them, because especially if they're things that we don't want to sway on that person.
But something exciting like that, I feel like she would, because again, if you go back to the book, she dated a guy before Scott that she fell in love with. I think through high school, Kevin Kenny. I think Kenny was his name. And he was very territorial. He was very controlling. She wasn't happy with him. She told her mom about that stuff. Now, we do know that she
I wonder how long into...
That was through into college. So she finally broke up with him.
How long into the relationship did she tell her?
It was when they were in college. But there were some points in high school where she told her too. So we know that Lacey did tell Sharon. Lacey knew that she thought Scott was cheating because she had told one of her friends. But that's something she didn't tell her mom. So you're right on that. Okay. But something exciting, because I've not told my mom everything of bad that I went through. I didn't tell her all the things my two exes did to me. But the exciting stuff I told her to make people think of this picture perfect marriage. There was something here with this, with her not telling her mom.
If you were gonna surprise your mom and dad with something, it would be just as equal of a reason to just keep, because it's of no consequence. You want to see the excitement on her face on Christmas morning.
Well,
especially when you also are going to take her in and show her the nursery that you finished. That's also nautical themed.
If Scott
to bring joy to the first grandchild, right?
If Scott told Lacey that it was a present for both of her parents, that clears that up right there. She's not going to tell her mom. Because he's turning around and telling the police that, I bought this for her dad. That's where the loophole is. So he may have told her, this is a present for both of your parents.
Yeah, or he may have said, I'm going to get this for your dad. And she might be like, it'll be from both of my parents. So in his mind, he could have still been like, plus Scott, Scott lies.
Yeah, so that's where I'm getting at. It's either she knew it was for both of her parents, or...
I don't see her knowing or not knowing about the boat being consequential to her death. I don't see her telling her mother or not telling her mother as being anything, any kind of
No, I don't think it has anything to do with her death, but I think it leads up to the lies that he tells.
And again, I don't think it is a determining factor in his guilt or innocence. Either way. Although I'm not sure, did Patsy Ramsey write those notes? I'm kidding. Poor Patsy.
Listen, I'm going to sidetrack here real quick. I've met John.
No.
I've exchanged glances with Burke. Don't think those two did it. I'm just going to say that.
With her, you did?
Right there. Huh?
You met Patsy?
No, I met John and I exchanged smiling eyes with Burke.
Yeah.
But.
Oh yeah, no. I met Burke and didn't know who he was. Because in my head he's an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And so when I having a conversation, and he told me his name was Burke.
I used to think Burke before I was ignorant and didn't put all the look at everything. Confirmation bias, because I really think that case is. But then when I met them in person, it was just this whole other vibe. But I never I'm only going to say I don't think those two did it, and I'm leaving it at that. So,
The very, people get very, very, very passionate about that case.
Yes.
And I will say, again, I met, like I said, I met Burke as well. And again, this is how dumb I am. And how I don't know who anyone is. I was having a conversation with, he's like, oh, my name's Burke. And still doesn't dawn on me.
Who else is named Burke though? Like,
he
was sitting next to me when I didn't realize it was him until Nikki Schmidt told me. And I'm like, so.
Well, and then I was with and this was in Denver at CrimeCon in 2025 in September.
Yep.
And so I was with Libby German and Abigail Williams, or the families from Delphi, and the and Jerry Holman and Nicholas McClellan, the prosecutor and lead investigator from the Delphi case, and their meet and greet. So we were, if you remember, like the meet and greet room, like where like all of everyone was. So their meet and greet was directly after John Ramsey's. And so, he had a long line, of course. And so we were standing against the wall next to him, while he finished his meet and greet.
Yep.
And I shouldn't say this, but I leaned over to one of the family members, from Delphi, and I was like, who is that old man? And they're like, that's John Ramsey. And I was like, no, he's old.
Well, yeah.
And then I was like,
he had John Benet.
Look, I know. And I don't mean that insulting, but it was just like, I also asked, this year in Vegas, I asked Peter Van Sant if he was Joe Kenda.
It happens.
I call it I carried a watermelon moments from Dirty Dancing. I asked, I think
Susan Hendricks looks like that other reporter that I always get mixed up with, and I can't think of her name right now, but there's one that I always think is Susan, and it's not. It will come to me.
Bill O'Reilly? No kidding. I love Susan. That's a joke. But I also asked, I think, Stephanie Rule, who is a giant, true crime podcaster. I was like, oh, do you have a podcast? Are you on YouTube? Are you monetized? Like,
yeah.
Give me my foot. I will stick it in my mouth.
Well, I didn't know who she was until my cousin pointed her out, and I was like, "Who?" And she's like, "Stephanie Harlow of Crime Weekly," and I'm like, just because we follow true crime doesn't mean we know who every single person is in true crime. But John Ramsey, I'm kind of like, come on, Aspen, like.
I know who no one is. I know who no one is. Like I mean, unless you call me Sugar, I don't know who you are.
I'm going to go ahead and say I didn't know who Annalise was from Seriously until someone goes, oh, it's Annalise. And I was like, who? Kendall Ray. I didn't know who she was until Denver CrimeCon. She has like 7 million Facebook fans. And I'm like, who? I get it. Like, I do. We don't know who every single person is.
No disrespect. I met is it Anne or Annie? Annie or Anna? Anne?
Annalise is how I say it. Annalise? Anna?
Annie.
Elise.
So I met her, no, it's Annie, I believe. I met her briefly in Denver. And then I think you pointed out to her, we were at the table next to her in Vegas. Yep. Because a good friend of mine was, two of my friends, have previously worked for her, but I didn't know didn't know who she was.
We're getting off track.
But it's always nice when you meet people, and you get to know them. But again, I'm like, oh, are you on YouTube or do you have a podcast? And she's probably like, I make like hundreds of $1,000s a month. I'm just, I don't know that I'm saying, but and I'm over here like, who are you?
I don't know how we got on this topic.
Sorry, anyway, let's get back.
I'm really tired too, so sorry. Let's get back to it.
This was our intermission.
Yeah. We needed a break for a second to like reset ourselves. I was up until 2 a.m. Back up at 9. I'm exhausted. Well, I have 2 more podcasts to do today, and I was like,
well, we've been watching an hour of nonsense, so we might as well talk some nonsense. I'm kidding.
Oh, I know how we got on that topic. We were talking about handwriting from Lacey and Scott versus Patsy Ramsey that somehow ended up on Annalise. So.
I still can't believe you blamed Patsy Ramsey for writing the note in the Scott Peterson case. Wow. I mean, the poor woman, I think, was already gone. No, she wasn't.
I think she played a part in this. And that's all I will ever say. I will not go into why I think that, what I think. But I do not think John did it. And I don't think Burke did it. But I think Patsy helped cover it up. I will admit that. So back to it. Back to Lacey.
Testimony at Scott Peterson's trial through a Dr. Chang, who was a title expert. Dr. Chang testified at trial that for the bodies to have washed up on the Richmond shoreline, the most likely launch point would have been exactly where Scott Peterson was fishing. Now, that was a powerful narrative, but new science is challenging the viability of that narrative.
Scott Peterson says he launched his boat here to go fishing the day he says Lacey disappeared.
Police found title charts of the San Francisco Bay on.
Innocence Project makes the argument that the new title science changes this case and undermines the reliability of the verdict here. Dr. Fagan, the Los Angeles Innocence Project's expert, has done something called computational hydrodynamic modeling. Using the Dell 3D modeling system, he ran various simulations, trajectory simulations, wind simulations. And the conclusion of the title expert is that the new title science places the bodies being inserted in the from a shallow water location, likely the Albany Bulb.
To my right is Point Isabel, where Lacey Peterson's body was found. Just north of that is the Richmond shoreline, where Connor's body was discovered. A few miles in this direction is Brooks Island. That is where Scott Peterson places himself fishing on the day of her disappearance. And the Berkeley Marina, where Scott launched from, is to my left. And of course, the Los Angeles Innocence Project believes that all of the new scientific evidence points here to the Albany Bulb as the possible place where Lacey's body would have been placed in the water in order to wind up where she was found at Point Isabel.
In 2002, when Lacey Peterson went missing,
I was a faculty member at Cal Poly at San Luis Obispo. I worked with San Francisco State University in San Francisco Bay.
So you know this body of water because so much of this case centers on the question of where Lacey Peterson's body was placed in the bay. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a storm event between April 11th and April 12th, 2003, that both the defense and the prosecution seem to believe may have been the triggering event that brought the bodies up. The body was anchored, and when it washed up was in a condition that indicated that it had been there for weeks or months.
That story is the most plausible. The bodies were lodged on the seafloor for some time and likely released during that storm event.
I want to start with Dr. Chang's testimony at trial that Scott Peterson anchored Lacey Peterson's body in the bay somewhere near this location where he was fishing. Dr. Chang is a hydrologist. Is that a fit for doing the general analysis, backtracking from where these bodies were located to where they might have been placed?
Absolutely. He has the background to do this. For Dr. Chang's model, what you do is you grid the entire bay at 500-meter resolution. So each grid space is a 500-meter block. And basically looking at the adjacent block, whether it has a flow of water into it or not, and then translating that flow to the next block. So it's like pixels, if you will, in a picture. So as water moves from one pixel to another, it actually creates that flow field or the tidal flows in the bay. But one of the odd things about the trial testimony was that Dr. Chang only used wind as a factor to backtracking the bodies.
He only used wind.
Yeah, there's problems with that. He cited his title paper in the testimony, but then again, never used it.
So the conclusions that he arrived at, which he testified to, were based entirely on wind and not tidal action.
Right. Why he didn't use tides is sort of a mystery because that's his background, and that's the reason he's an expert to testify. In the bay itself, it's a very tidally driven system.
And tell me, if you will, your confidence level on Dr. Chang's conclusions that the body were placed here.
0.
And what's your confidence level with the current day model, Dr. Fagan's theory that Laci Peterson's body was placed in the bay somewhere off of the Albany bulb? And of course, Dr. Fagan has the benefit of using the Delft 3D model.
Yeah, Delft 3D is the model. It's astronomically different. It's able to take in high resolution data to help you drive the model. It integrates freshwater inputs. It integrates the wind. It integrates the tidal forcing. All of those things gave me much more confidence in believing the model output.
Also, Fagan has looked at the conclusion that Dr. Chang arrived at. And he's done some modeling of where that body should have ended up if, in fact, she had been anchored, or where Dr.
Right.
Chang testified that she was anchored.
Starting in the position of that location, you see the body would have gone behind Brooks Island, and then it would have been shot through this channel and then oscillated here in the tides, possibly to the Golden Gate Bridge and out. But the bodies couldn't have ended up where they were found based on where Dr. Chang put the position in the trial. I think it's important to remember Dr. Chang did not have the tools that are available today. You know, I think at the time he was the person to call if they were going to deal with tides, but it's bizarre that tides weren't used in his testimony.
Now, the big question, based on what you've seen, where do you think Laci was likely placed in the water?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's possible that it is here, as Dr. Fagan shows, but I think there's some nuance that have some bearing on the actual location. If the position of the body was here, this is a very protected area, sort of shielded, if you will, from the storm event. So it could be a little further south along the coast here.
Right along the coast here in Albany and Richmond.
Yeah.
And not anywhere in the water near or off Brooks Island where he was fishing that day.
Right. Highly unlikely that the bodies were anchored in this location.
We went down the trails. The trails are ostensibly wide enough to take a car down. He didn't need a boat to dump the body in the Albany bulb. He wouldn't have launched the boat at the Berkeley Marina if he intended to deposit her body at the Albany bulb. He wouldn't have needed to. What if he wasn't fishing off of Brooks Island? What if he just took the body over to the area of the shallow water and dumped it there? If you are a first-time criminal, where does it seem better to dump a body? Way out in the bay, in the deepest waters, or in shallow waters 10 feet from the shore? What's interesting about this area is there was a search that was done of the bay, but the water here is very shallow. So shallow that this area at the Albany bulb wasn't searched. Since the shallow waters weren't searched, it's possible that Laci's body could have been there for months. The state refutes these claims, saying that the area of the Albany bulb was in fact searched with side-scan sonar and that the LAIP cannot demonstrate that there was a lack of search effort. The states argue that the Los Angeles Innocence Project is arguing something that was known to science as early as 2003. The Los Angeles Innocence Project, of course, points out the fact that they're using new Delft 3D technology. We are light years more advanced today than we were in 2003.
I thought I would be more skeptical when I came out because it would take about a 10-minute walk to bring a body here in this location. But in walking out here, these are wide paths. You could get a vehicle down them, and it's not impossible to conceive at all of someone easily bringing a body and placing it in the water. It seems much easier to have accomplished that here than out of the Berkeley Marina via a boat where there are so many people.
There's no suggestion that Scott Peterson was at the Albany bulb. There's no suggestion that he drove his car out in that direction.
If you're going to entertain an alternate theory, and of course the Los Angeles Innocence Project is asking us to entertain an alternate theory, that someone else is responsible for Laci Peterson's death. And that's where everyone starts to roll their eyes. But being here physically, coupled with the title maps and the modeling that I've seen, says to me that the Los Angeles Innocence Project's theories make a lot of sense. It not only works for the scientists, but visually it works for a layman like me.
One of the big puzzles in this case is the timeline. When exactly was Laci Peterson killed?
One thing about this case is that it's a timeline case. And the state established their entire timeline on the basis of the testimony of one person, Karen Service, the Peterson's neighbor. But was Karen Service's testimony as critical as prosecutors made it out to be? There were only 5 murders in Modesto in 2002.
The Modesto Police Department does not have extensive experience investigating murder cases. They had almost no experience dealing with high-profile investigations. The disappearance of a woman that turns into a criminal investigation, all in the media, created this rush to be able to put a name to a suspect as quickly as possible.
When I got there, the first person that I talked to after meeting Scott was his next-door neighbor, Karen Service.
Karen encountered the Petersons' dog, Mackenzie, with its leash attached to it, unattended in the front yard on the morning of December 24th.
So you took the dog, put her in the backyard, closed the gate, and went on your merry way.
Mm-hmm. After placing Scott and Laci's dog, Mackenzie, in the backyard of the Petersons' home, Karen Service had errands to do. One of those errands was to go to a Christmas store by the name of Austin's.
And we were able later, because of a receipt that she had kept, to trace down the approximate times that she actually found Mackenzie.
And she's able to narrow that time down to 10:18. At trial, the state presented Karen Service's testimony for the premise that Laci Peterson had already been murdered by the morning of December 24th and therefore didn't take Mackenzie out for her normal morning walk. The state never addressed how Mackenzie got a leash on in the first place, why she was out in the front yard, or any alternative timeline that would have involved Laci preparing to go for a walk and being called back into the house.
This leads me to believe that Scott took Mackenzie for a walk, had the leash on, let her go in the backyard. Okay, didn't fully take the leash off or take Mackenzie in the house. He was packing the boat, packing the truck with Laci's body and everything else he was taking with him. And when he left that morning, the gate didn't close all the way and Mackenzie got out. I also want to go back because I know this was a little longer of a clip. There was some contradiction, unless I'm just missing what I just heard with Chris Pixley saying that, you could bring a body to a shallow water 10 feet from the shoreline, or you can take it out in the middle of the bay. What would you do if you were trying to get rid of a body? I mean, I would take it out to the middle of the bay. So why would Scott take it to the shallow end? Like, it makes no sense to me. I think her body floated there. I honestly still think, I don't care what the tides say, I don't think he's that dumb to just leave her right there in the shallow part of the water.
Can we also use their own words that they've said many, many times throughout this program so far, and we're not even halfway through this episode, but in broad daylight, we're thinking that Scott drove his big 4-door truck with his boat attached to it down a pathway along a shoreline with there's water on both sides. So you're completely in view of anyone that's out there so that you can dispose of a body 10 feet offshore. First of all, how do you get the body 10 feet offshore? are you launching your boat to go 10 feet? Is that more plausible than a body going into the water somewhere by Brooks Island? And while we were looking that up, I just wanted to clarify, because again, when we talk about narrative storytelling, what they just presented to us as evidence and information of Dr. Chang's testimony and how they can discredit it. First of all, he did use tidal and wind in his testimony. And so what he actually said is that based on wind and tidal information, the fetus's body, whether still inside the mother or not, was put in the bay between Brooks Island and Berkeley Marina. He cautioned, though, this is the highest probability location. He was then asked, can you predict with any certainty within inches, feet, where these bodies would have started from? And he said, no, I'm afraid not. So he acknowledged on the stand that he can't say for certain that is where they went in the water. It's just the most probable. So what they just presented to us was that he testified that this is where they went to water and how that's impossible. So he never conclusively said this is 100% what the truth. He said this is what, to the best of my knowledge, the best of information we have, where it would have made most sense. He also acknowledged that he couldn't reproduce the trajectory of Laci Peterson's body, only a possible path for the fetus, saying that it was easier to determine that because of the lighter weight and the fact that it was unencumbered. Prosecutors believe, I'm not going into those details, but after it was expelled. And then the only other thing I want to say is that defense, where does it say? Garagos asked Chang, said, are your findings assumptions? To which Chang said, most scientific information is initially based on assumptions. So the way that I feel like that they presented the information by Dr. Chang, I felt like we were just told, like, and if you don't look into these things sometimes, if you just automatically believed, oh yeah, so they totally discredited that the state's expert from the quoted testimony he actually gave. They misrepresented what he was saying. He was giving them the best assumption scientifically that he could, given the information that they had, just like the defense is now doing. And I really, again, have to argue, for the defense to even have an argument, they have to input a date that she goes into that water. And they don't know that date. So whatever findings they're getting are an assumption that's way, way based more loosely on the truth or facts that we do know than anything the state has shown.
I don't think that shallow part of her body being found can prove anything, because they don't have a definite day of when she was dumped in that water.
But for them to say there's no way she could have, that's where she would have come up, if they had to, they had to have inputted a date, and that would all then change the conditions of it. And then in one breath they said that I think the word he used was tidally. But then they were like, oh, but this area was very protected from the wind and the tidal patterns. Then I'm like, wait, is it both? Like, which one is it? And you know what? In shallow water, tidal patterns, of course, are going to be a very important part of it. But I can see where there would be emphasis put on the wind factor in a more shallow area if there had been a recent storm, because that would have an effect, especially on a lighter, more easily movable object such as a full-term baby. So putting emphasis on the wind, as well as the tidal patterns, I think is important, especially since there had been that storm. But again, Dr. Chang on the stand, acknowledged that, most scientific findings begin with assumptions. So that was not represented that way in what we just watched.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Karen Service was completely credible. I have found nothing to suggest that she was lying. I was working at the time for the Modesto Bee. I was a reporter, and I was assigned to cover the case.
So you're the only person that's ever interviewed Karen Service. What was it about Karen Service's testimony that was so credible?
Karen Service was an important witness for the prosecution because she established the timeline. I knew Karen Service prior to the trial, and she was entirely credible.
The possibility exists that because she didn't go knock on the door and give the dog back to Lacey, that Lacey was alive and well and inside the house. The scenario doesn't require Karen Service to have lied. It simply says that putting the dog behind the gate is not an indication of whether Lacey's alive or dead at all. One possible scenario is that Lacey prepared to take the dog on a walk, that she had gone back into the house for some reason, and Karen Service came and found the dog unattended and put it away. Karen Service's testimony tells us nothing about whether Lacey Peterson walked her dog that morning. It only tells us that the dog was prepped to go for a walk and was in the front yard, and Lacey wasn't there at the moment. Also, Karen was not the only eyewitness that morning. Central to the Los Angeles Innocence Project case is the fact that there were 15 eyewitnesses who said they saw Lacey Peterson walking her dog on the morning of December 24, 2002, after Scott Peterson had already left for the San Francisco Bay. If they are to be believed, it paints a much clearer picture of what happened that day.
I'm Gary Ermoyan, private investigator. I'm here at the Mitchell residence. I'm with Vivian and Bill Mitchell, with Grace Jewell, with Tony Freitas.
And the people that stepped forward, they came forward immediately. But according to the LAIP, most of their statements were never followed up on by the investigators for the Modesto police. This is the first time I've seen a video interview with any of them. And it's the first time they've been shown outside a courtroom. Gary Ermoyan is a local private investigator in Modesto, California, hired by the defense team to interview the many eyewitnesses that the police did not speak to in the run-up to the trial. Some of those interviews were recorded on tape.
Sometime between 9:30 a.m. and 9:45 a.m., you saw Lacey Peterson walking down City Avenue. Is that correct? That's right.
I said, God, you see that woman, she's pregnant, she's struggling with the dog.
And she had dark clothing on, and her hair was real shiny, shoulder-length black. I had seen the posters, and I knew that was the woman that I had saw that day.
It was definitely Lacey Peterson.
These are just people who are giving contemporaneous statements, honestly telling the investigator what they remember.
They kept asking for anyone who had sightings, and so eventually I decided that I probably should report it.
There were a lot of witnesses who came forward, but the investigators didn't follow up with the vast majority of them.
We're going down La Loma. We see this lady walking her dog. She looked too pregnant to be out in the cold.
When I saw the news on Christmas night that they showed the Peterson dog, and that's when I turned to my wife and said, I saw that dog in the park, and in my mind's eye, I see a round person with black leggings and a white smock.
15 witnesses came forward with eyewitness sightings of Lacey. The sheer number of eyewitnesses, that's compelling.
The time was about sometime after 9:45.
Somewhere between 10 and 10:30. Around 9:30, there could have been 9:45.
It was between 9 and 11 a.m.
It could be 9:45. It could have been 10:15.
The witnesses placed Lacey Peterson walking her dog in her neighborhood after the time that Scott Peterson would have left for his warehouse and for the Berkeley Marina.
The majority of the witnesses contradict Scott's and the state's timeline of events, because Scott claims Lacey was home watching Martha Stewart at 10 a.m.
That's not something that you can dismiss, but it was actively being dismissed by the investigators. The Modesto police disregarded most of the eyewitness testimony. That is an indictment of the type of investigation that was done here. I mean, it challenges whether this was a thorough investigation.
I don't remember anybody seeing Lacey walk the dog, because I don't think that ever occurred. I don't think she walked anything because she was dead by then.
A sergeant that was in charge of the Lacey thing, I gave him a statement.
We were interviewed by a motorcycle policeman.
But nothing happened.
And then nobody talked to me after that.
Yeah, I was surprised that the Modesto police didn't come talk to me.
Their eyes were on Scott Peterson himself.
There were a number of people in the neighborhood who I talked to soon after she disappeared, who told me about their supposed sightings of a pregnant woman and a dog on Christmas Eve. There were hundreds and thousands of tips coming into police. Most of them were well-meaning and some were earnest.
Without asking you about names of specific witnesses that you talked to, I'm interested in knowing whether any of those witnesses are cited in the LAIP's filings.
I did interview some of the people who were cited in the appeal. I ended up questioning their credibility. They would use words to the effect of, well, in my mind's eye, I can see a blur over here, and I think it could have been a person with a dog, and that person might have been pregnant, and I just can't really say.
I never thought that there'd be anything interesting to say about a case that has been poured over like no other case I've ever seen for decades. And the more I read, the more fascinated I became. I've been studying memory for a long time and bringing that understanding of the basic science of memory, how memories are formed in the brain, to the real world, especially of eyewitness memory. What time frame are we talking about when you reference the reliability of memory early on? I usually say days and weeks after the event, maybe months, but once you're talking about a year and certainly 2 years, those memories, they might be true, they might be false, you just can't tell. That's the methodology that I applied to the evidence in the Scott Peterson case. And I focused on the earliest reports from these witnesses that I could find. Days, maybe weeks, that's it. What they were saying at that time. What's most interesting to me from these very early reports are common features jump out across independent witnesses at a time when memory's most reliable. A pregnant lady, a dog, time frame after she was supposedly murdered by Scott Peterson. So we took the drive around Modesto and followed the location of these eyewitness statements.
We're passing the gas station where Homer Maldonado and his wife stopped to get gas. As they came down this road, he said he was driving slowly.
And I noticed a young pregnant woman struggling with a golden retriever.
The dog was pulling her, and that's relevant because that keeps coming up. What was the next witness that stood out to you?
My name is Vivian Regine Mitchell.
This home, to my left, has a kitchen window that looks out on La Sombra.
Hey, I was standing right here, washing the dishes. He pulled his curtain back. There was this beautiful lady and her beautiful dog walking up the street.
Vivian said that she saw a lady between 10 and 10:30 a.m. and that she was almost positive it was Lacey. Same time frame as the witnesses were saying. It's early reports of memory when memories are most reliable. So I'd pay attention to this myself.
He was wearing a white top with long sleeve and black slacks.
I understand that Vivian Mitchell was elderly, and you might jump to the conclusion that therefore we shouldn't listen to anything she has to say. But that would be the wrong way to think about it. Science-based evidence of the effects of aging on the reliability of confidently reported memories does not show that it has no information value.
It's still useful information, just not as useful as from a younger person.
That morning, we didn't know there was anything wrong.
She was relatively confident early report. In the case of Karen Service, her timeline played an outsized role in that case. Well, I mean, I congratulate the prosecution for focusing on the early reports of an eyewitness, in this case, Service, but I can't think of a reason to focus on her selectively. There's so many witnesses who claim to have seen Laci. And I just want to keep emphasizing that doesn't mean Scott Peterson is innocent. I don't know. But, the prosecution's particular theory is running into some serious headwinds, I would say, really serious headwinds.
I want to say that the fact I just said is just, people saw her walking doesn't prove his innocence. And we don't have the maps to show how far apart these houses were, what directions they were going and saw her in, because she can't be the only pregnant girl walking her dog around Modesto.
No.
Like there's more than that. And we know that they could have saw somebody 2 days prior and thought, okay, yeah, that's who I saw. They could have saw somebody that morning that maybe had red hair, but because they saw Laci was missing, they automatically think she had brown hair. Or, maybe her leggings were like a navy blue and not really black. And it's really hard. That's all I got for that one.
Right.
And the dog being returned by Karen, obviously
Makes
she
sense.
knew them very well. So that's the only thing on that. But all the rest of the witnesses, you can't prove that they all saw Laci. They
may think that they did. People can easily misremember things very quickly. I always use the example of like I did this one time on a live stream where I'd been on for an hour and I turned my camera off and I said, what color shirt am I wearing?
Yeah.
It was amazing. I could probably got 10 different answers from people, and I'd been on camera for an hour. And, and I did it intentionally. I turned my camera off and I waited a minute or two. And then I think so a few people got it correctly, got it correct. But so, you can literally be sitting there watching someone for an hour and in your mind completely create the different color shirt that they're wearing.
Yes.
Or just not remember, and I'm not in that. So I'm just not discrediting, that they may have thought they did, but they did show, or I have seen a map of the spottings where she was at, and several of them can't be her because they're at the same time, but in miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that not all of the sightings were Laci if she was walking Mackenzie. But again, people typically live in an area with people that are also their peers. People are in the same, style of homes because they're usually at the same point in life, So lots of new families were in this area. And like I said, there are lots of white pregnant women with golden retrievers in Modesto, California.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to actually see the statistic of how many people own a golden retriever.
I would like to know if any of those. I would like to know if any pregnant women with golden retrievers that walked their dogs that morning ever came forward to say, I was out walking my dog, and did they leave that out of the evidence?
No, because they probably ended up with a newborn baby within a month, and they were like, I'm busy.
Yeah, but still, if I knew I was out that morning and I saw this missing woman, I'd be like, I was out too. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, but you're also looking at it through the lens of like a missing person. A lot of people don't think the way that we do, first of all, and a lot of people also don't think that they don't make the connection in their head. They could be like, oh, hey, if you were in this area, I might be like, oh, so-and-so, Matt looks like me, but that doesn't mean I'm going to call the police and be like, oh, no, I did stop and get gas at this place. You don't normally, or you don't want to insert yourself into it because you assume the police know what they already know.
Well, people come out 20 years later and saying, oh, I witnessed this. I mean, you never know.
Right. And how, we don't know, we don't know. I remember how fast it was publicized that there were 15 people that said they saw a pregnant woman and a dog.
Yeah.
So, I mean, by the time that came out, those women might have not even remembered they walked their dog that day. Pregnancy brain.
Good point.
Walking that dog early in the morning.
Lacey's typical dog walking route took her past Vivian Mitchell's home and into Loloma Park, where Lacey was seen by a number of witnesses. According to the LAIP, these witnesses were also ignored by investigators. I want to find out.
Of all the Lacey sightings, which, if any of those, stood out to you?
There is really no one witness who stood out far above all the others, but I'll say that, one witness who seems just pretty compelling to me is Campos.
Diana Campos is someone who saw Lacey walking her dog out on the Dry Creek Trail, which is part of the East Loloma Park.
She also, the time, she has it at 10:45. And when you look back at the early reports, that's what she's saying. And she's saying it because she had to be at work at 11. That's how she knew it was 10:45.
And this is somebody who was a custodian at the Stanislaus County Hospital who had to clock in at 11 o'clock and is able to show, I clocked in that day at 11.
That lends credibility to the time. This one's more anchored to a documentable event. If you're trying to get at the truth of the matter, you should weigh that more than you weigh other accounts, perhaps.
The state's theory is centered around this Karen service receipt, which allows them to backtrack to the time that she placed the Peterson's dog in their backyard, and they base their entire theory on the idea that Lacey Peterson was dead by the time Karen service discovered the dog. But Diana Campos had a card showing what time she stamped in for work, and she saw Lacey walking the dog when she was on a smoking break before it started. Why isn't Diana Campos's timeline and
Sorry, I've always had a problem with this because you have someone that knew the family very well that put the dog in the backyard at 10:34. Yet Chris, and I apologize, I respect him, but Chris is up here now saying we need to take this total stranger word who said she saw a pregnant woman or dog at 10:45 as more credible than the woman who knew the family and put the dog in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and literally for no reason other than they're just saying they believe that we should take the stranger's account more seriously than the person that knew them.
Mm-hmm.
I would like for them to explain to me why we're supposed to take that more seriously, other than the fact that it fits their narrative.
We would like to hear that too.
I've yet to see them prove. I just want to see one piece of proof. I'm begging them. We're like an hour and a half show. I'm like, give me one, show me the proof.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell it to me. Show it to me.
Yep.
Show me the information you're using to get this information. This is not new. None of this is new. Sorry.
Well, none of it is. I agree.
her receipt as important as Karen services?
So I thought we'd take a walk in Loloma Park and just get a feeling for what it's like around the same time of the morning.
Right.
We do have a number of witnesses that saw her here, including Diane Campos. You have other witnesses like John Brazil. This is somebody who's a Park Service worker, and he says he saw Mackenzie pulling on Lacey. Now, that's a commonality among a number of these 15 eyewitnesses who saw Lacey and the dog that morning. Mike Chavetta said that he saw Lacey Peterson walking her dog.
I mean, from an investigative standpoint, I would bring a witness here to the park, say, okay, this is the park. Where were you? And when you were there, where was Lacey? And then that would give us a sense of the distance. If we don't know that, then it's very difficult to really provide a reliable assessment on how reliable their sighting was.
I'm interested to know if proximity to the event that you cite matters in terms of witness memory.
It does. It reduces the likelihood of getting a confident report. Yeah, that happens. They become more likely to be wrong, and they let you know by saying, I'm not sure. And when the distance is long and witness is nevertheless saying, I confidently saw that face, it doesn't reduce its reliability. So Campos was far away, I guess. It's less likely that she would have been confident, but she was confident. And when they are, it tends to be reliable. So you still want to put weight on that, and you just have to factor it in with, I don't know, 20 other witnesses or something, what they also remember from that early morning, and see if you can make a sensible picture.
All of these sightings are around the same time on December 24, 2002. All of them are given by these 15 eyewitnesses to the police within days of her disappearance. The times of some of the eyewitness sightings of Lacey walking her dog overlap in places that would not have been possible. But there are enough eyewitnesses that police had a reason to pursue an alternate timeline.
Considering the potential of these witnesses and the fact that they were not taken seriously leads me to really only one conclusion, and that is that if you think that you already know who did it, then spending time interviewing and bringing out maps and having a witness explain where they were and provide you with their entire narrative is a colossal waste of time. That's the only logical explanation I can come up with, that at that time, the investigators must have felt really sure that they had their man.
Tony Freitas is probably number one or number two for me in terms of the witnesses that I would like to meet with and talk to.
I understand that you attempted to report this to the police. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And so I called and said that I had seen her walking her dog, and that the reason I was calling was because I knew that it was after 9:30, and that was the last time she was seen.
There's so many factors here that help with this testimony. He drives the same route every single day. He knows that it would have been at least 9:45. I mean, Tony's just there. He's wearing a tank top. He's just, all right, you want me to tell you what I know? I'm here to tell you.
Had you ever seen this same woman before?
Never.
Of the few eyewitnesses that the police say they spoke to, Tony Freitas is one of the only ones that's still alive.
In 1999, I had an opportunity to work for Oral Wheat Breads. It was always just as a delivery person.
Did you have a standard route that you were on?
Yeah. When you run a regular route like that, you're always on the same schedule, pretty much, unless something drastic comes up where there's an accident or something. And I knew it was after 9:30, and it was before 10 o'clock that I had seen her walking.
Did your company keep logs, or did you have timesheets that showed when you dropped off at each of your locations?
Yes. In our trucks, we had a printer that would print out the time, the stop.
How did everybody see her at the same time? Did they all live next door to each other? Did they all work next door to each other?
They said several of the sightings were all around the same time, but in places she couldn't have been because they were miles apart. They showed the map even. So that's what I'm saying.
I was distracted.
They're there's 15 to 20. They're like all these 15 to 20 witnesses, and I'm like, and then like Chris Pixley himself was like, but many of them couldn't be true because they were all at the same time in different locations. So
yeah, sorry, I was dealing with a text and I completely missed that.
I unmuted it and said, "There's your map," because they showed,
Sorry.
And again, I'm counting, and again, we don't know that they didn't investigate these witness statements, but they might have looked into them and found nothing. But guess what they did? Guess what they did look into and find? Scott Peterson. So you follow the investigative leads that actually lead you to the next clue or the next lead. Sometimes
like Cheryl McCollum always says, follow the evidence.
Nothing comes up. Or they're like, oh, this couldn't have been her because it was across town, or it wasn't a golden retriever, or we have this woman on a traffic cam and they were wrong. She's not pregnant. She's just big. There's so many factors in it, or that was 2 days before. But again, I'll keep my mouth shut. I'm just gonna watch and wait for something to be presented to me that is not subjective and is not cherry picked. But I will say that driver that just said that Yeah, his route might have been the same every day, but unless something extraordinary happened, like it being Christmas, where, you know, maybe not all your locations that you deliver to are open that day.
Yep. Got it.
So maybe your day.
Really know nothing until I started seeing the posters about a week later. One of my friends had brought it up to me saying, hey, this woman had been missing, and showed me a poster. And when I seen the poster, I go, that's the same woman that I seen walking a dog. Same build, same height, same haircut, everything.
So it's your friend that was the spark that caused you to report it.
Originally, he reported it. He told me, I'm going to call and tell them that, you know, I have a friend that had seen it and stuff.
So your friend made contact with the police and made a report about what you saw.
Yes.
And he left your information with them and your contact.
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
And did you ever go to any of the volunteer centers or to the police to make an in-person report?
No.
So what was the first time then that you did talk to anyone from the police? At some point, somebody contacted you.
Not that I ever remember that anybody from the police department or nothing.
So you had visits from reporters and you had visits from the defense investigator, Gary Moyen.
Yes.
Okay. To your recollection, you didn't have anyone that identified themselves as a police officer or investigator who visited you?
No.
There's a report that Bill Grogan filed suggesting that just prior to the trial of Scott Peterson, he came and spoke to you. Your statement is right here.
So he spelled my name wrong. And then it says Tony could not see a blouse or the type of shoes. How can I not see a top that she was wearing? I mean, that doesn't make sense. She was wearing a light colored sweater. And it wasn't light colored pants. It was dark pants that I had seen her walking in. So I don't know why that says that.
So basically there are aspects of that report that purports to be a conversation with you that are not accurate.
Yeah. Listen, yeah.
Do you now recall that conversation at all?
No. This could have been a possibility, but I don't remember that at all. The only thing I remember was basically just getting the subpoena.
Do you recall who subpoenaed you to testify?
Garagos.
Okay. The defense did?
Yes.
You were called in to testify, but they didn't ultimately examine you before the jury. Did you ever get an explanation from anyone as to why they didn't put you on to testify?
Never.
The witnesses that saw Lacey on the 24th, I think, were telling the truth. But at the time, I thought that we had debunked their case.
If you think you didn't call them because you felt like you had already debunked?
Not only with debunked, people get sidetracked by the fact that there was no evidence in this case.
The defense team made a decision not to bring forward those eyewitnesses known to the defense. Garagos' team isn't putting any of these people on the stand. You have to wonder if the trial would have had a different outcome had the defense called even some of these 15 witnesses. How'd you feel when the verdict came out?
I just shook my head. Like anybody I ever kind of talked to, saying, well, I seen her and stuff, and that. Oh no, you're wrong. There's no way that this guy did it. He did it. Well, if they said that Scott was already gone and I seen her after that,
it means he didn't do it.
It means that he didn't do it.
You said your confidence level that it was Lacey Peterson that you saw that morning was 99% at the time.
I still feel the same, that's who it was.
Would you be willing to testify that you were never contacted in any way, to your knowledge, by anyone that identified themselves as being from the Modesto police?
Yeah, I would still stand by that.
Tony's statement to us and Tony's statement to Gary Moyen back in 2003 are not without some problems.
And so I called and said that I had seen her.
One of the problems is that when Gary Moyen came around to meet with him back in 2003, Tony told him that he called in to the tip line originally. Tony's now saying that it was his friend who made the call to the tip line. What matters is he believable? I found Tony to be very believable.
There's just so many new aspects of this case that were previously unheard of, undiscussed, that got very short shrift, if any attention at all, in the trial, either by the prosecution or the defense.
The reality is that you had 15 eyewitnesses, and none of these witnesses testified at trial, and we have no clear answer on why they were not called. You have the investigators destroying investigative notes, now arisen with Tony Freitas publishing reports about witnesses that you met with, where the witness says, I never met with any investigators. That's another level. This is entirely what the LA Innocence Project was called upon to do, to test the constitutional reliability of this verdict. But I still have questions. I'm eager to keep digging into these claims and looking into the new evidence.
Mark Geragos points to newly discovered evidence he says was never turned over by prosecutors.
They had a theory, and they were going to get rid of everything that didn't support it.
The fetal expert testified that baby Connor died on or around December 23, 2002.
How many other experts consulted in order to find one that gives them the answer that they like?
There are multiple witnesses talking about an unusual van. What the hell?
This changes everything.
I never, ever had a doubt that he didn't do this.
To not consider that there might be a correlation is investigatively negligent.
He did not do this. Something was going on across the street.
We just want to get to the truth. It's what was missed in this case that maybe is moving me the most now.
This is crazy.
Okay. One thing that stuck out with me, all of that guy said that they never investigated him, that he's basically saying they put that in there and he never said that. But the other part that Chris just
Didn't remember anything.
The other part that Chris just said is there's so many new things, there's so many new pieces of evidence that lead to this, blah, blah, blah. What new evidence did we get? All I heard was that Lacey wrote on the Post-it note and that there was 15 witnesses that say they saw a girl in black leggings walking a golden retriever. I really didn't get anything else from that episode.
They're using, I think that their main basis that they are going off of is that they truly believe that this new technology that they're using to determine the locations the bodies came out of the water not fitting where the prosecution said they went in at is what they're hinging this all on. The other stuff is all just complete conjecture. But again, they are determining that this thesis or, this theory based on information that they are putting in to fit it.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but I'm like, Chris just also said, we don't know why these 15 witnesses weren't called as Jen. We do, because 30 seconds prior to that, Mark Geragos said, we didn't call them because we thought we debunked the prosecution's case. Not to mention that, that guy was a problematic witness. His friend called, then he said he called. Yeah. He didn't remember giving a report.
He wasn't reliable.
Then he claimed the information in the report wasn't what he remembers. But yet, how do we take any credibility? So they're saying we need to believe him, but we can discount everything an expert doctor said going off of the science that they used at the time.
Yep.
So that's not credible. But this dude that delivered, bread or whatever it was, that didn't remember even, writing a statement and then doesn't agree with what the statement said.
I think about something I did 20 years ago.
That's where we put the credibility. Just like, we put the credibility on the woman that said she saw the dog and Lacey, who didn't know them 15 minutes after, or 20 minutes after the woman who knew them actually put Mackenzie back in the yard. Like, I mean, how do you, that the mental gymnastics that you have to use. And I hate that I'm being so skeptical on this, because I really want to be objective. I really want to hear information that at least makes me question this.
Yeah, me too. But
you know, and I'm fine, because I was so willing to be open to, not that I really thought anything was going to change my mind on the innocence of guilt, but if there's evidence that proves his innocence, then absolutely I would. But I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but
no, that
I mean,
episode didn't.
I could take any case out there, and I could make this exact same docuseries. I could do this about Jean-Benet Ramsey, and I could make every single bit of it sound like it was John, whatever his name is, John Mark Carr.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be like, oh, well, police didn't do this, or they didn't do this. Or, you know, why wasn't this person questioned, or why did they drop this? Because maybe the evidence didn't lead to it. But they're not saying that. You know?
Well, nope, they're cherry picking, like you said. And there's nothing about that episode that made me go, huh, maybe Scott really is innocent.
And
I was hoping.
Like, if you really want to prove something, especially, I mean, because they know going into this that they are up against the public. You know, public opinion is strongly still that Scott Peterson is guilty. So, if I am going to, with my whole heart, believe that the public is wrong and that I can prove it, yes, presenting new evidence and information is very, very important. But you have to then not pretend your audiences are idiots. You have to then explain why that evidence is valid and real. You can't cherry pick the information and just assume they will believe you, because that's treating your audience like they're idiots. And that's what I felt like. I felt like I just had an hour and a half of my life wasted and talked to you like I was an idiot that was just willing to believe anything that I watched.
Almost as if we were people who never knew anything about this case at all.
And I hate to say that, because, again, I respect Chris Pixley. I think that she is a very good investigator, and I respect Mark Garagos even. So, but I mean, and then I also would say, you have to, if you want to change the public's opinion on something, you have to take the pieces of evidence that the public holds as fact, and you have to be able to then disprove them.
Yep.
So why did they bring up the hair and the pliers? Is it because they can't? Is that because they can't explain that away?
They didn't bring the anchors up yet, so maybe in part 2.
Right. Well, and I was waiting for the van. I knew the van would come up, because that's something I've always been very, very interested in, that aspect of it. There was actually even a short time that I considered, okay, that is odd. What if, But when and it's been a couple of years now, but when I really did the research of information from the case, I mean, unless there was just a catastrophe of errors, and that could have happened. I mean, the defense, and I'm assuming now they are going to present a very, very swayed portrayal of the whole burglary across the street thing. And I have a feeling we're not going to get all of the facts.
I will say this. I'm looking forward to seeing, maybe they'll change our minds in episode 2. Maybe there'll be some kind of jaw-dropping evidence, but I haven't seen anything on Facebook floating around that anybody had watched this and said, oh my God, I can't believe this. Or any news reports that had, breaking news on the Scott Peterson case. Here's the new evidence. I haven't seen anything in the past 48 hours. So to me, it's leading me to believe, and that's just my assumption, that there's nothing new about this.
You didn't read my free Scott Peterson Reddit page? I'm kidding. I'm not on there.
No. But I'm just going to assume that nothing is jaw-dropping in part 2. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But there's nothing new about any of this to me. So part 2, we're going to do the same thing. We'll dive in. We'll listen to the defense. We'll listen to the prosecutors. We'll listen to the evidence and hope.
I will try to be quieter. I will try not to look as annoyed. And I apologize because I really went into this very open-minded and objective.
I did
and
too.
I'm still going to be, but I just, don't talk to me like I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Don't show me some, because I mean, I already sat through an hour ad for this at Crime Con.
Yep.
And now I feel like I just sat there an hour and a half of, someone telling me their side of a story without, I don't know.
Without proof, without the receipts. But all right, guys, we will lead into
I'll believe you. Just show me how you got there.
Well, hopefully in part 2, they'll show us. Maybe we'll get lucky and say, oh, shit. Oh, okay. No, I don't think so. But I can't say I went into this completely open-minded because I am 100% still believer that Scott did this. I don't think
that's what I said to Chris. And that's what I said to Chris that evening. I said, it's going to take a mountain to change to move my opinion on this. But I'm going into it with an open mind. I'm willing, and I'm looking forward to hearing how the information and evidence you have to present.
I mean, they have to have some kind of evidence to be able to make a 2-part series and really build this up that there's evidence to show that he's innocent. And I'm not seeing that. Why would you make a docuseries? Why? Just because you want to make it relevant and keep Scott in the spotlight? Because the LA Innocence Project is working on it?
And I will say also, the LA Innocence Project, their involvement in this, the Innocence Project serves a very important purpose. So, I mean, I think a lot of people hear that and they think there's automatic legitimacy to it. The Innocence Project is not, to my knowledge, from my understanding, is not saying Scott Peterson is innocent. They are looking at what has happened in his case and trial and wanting to make sure that everything is fair and done the way it is, so that the judicial system is held the way that it should be. The reason his death penalty was overturned is because there was some juror misconduct that they found. I think some people still would disagree that wasn't misconduct, but the person misrepresented themselves, if I remember correctly, in some of the responses they gave when asked about questions about, was it infidelity or, I remember the juror it was, but that's pretty much what overturned his death penalty. Granted, it's also California, so the death penalty is pretty much just an indefinite stay. So, and I used to live in California, and like I said, I would drive by. He's not there anymore, but I would wave or I would give a hand gesture to Charles Manson and Scott Peterson every time I would drive by San Quentin, because it's right off the interstate, so you can see it very clearly from the road. And it was always weird to know that they were, like 2 of the most infamous people like that. But Menendez, no, I don't know if they were there, but several high pillars there, or were there at the time. Like I said, Scott Peterson's not there anymore; he's been moved. But
I really hope they go into the second episode talking about the anchors, because I do want to talk about that Nancy Grace. I researched that from that old episode where there was concrete, and I'm not being like, there is a pun intended here, but there was concrete evidence left behind from making those anchors. And I know he claimed that he only took 1, but there was 5 castings in the garage or something. And she thinks that's the biggest piece of circumstantial evidence for this entire case. So I hope it's brought up in this next episode, and I hope the pliers with her hair on it are brought up in the next episode.
Well, scientific speaking, the body would have had to have been anchored or caught in something that would have prevented it from coming to the surface sooner.
Well, he had the concrete mix bags in his garage too. So I don't know, guys. We're going to lead into season or part 2 of this. We're going to take a short hiatus because.
And they have the pictures. You see the pictures of the spilt cement. They're still out there.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have watched part 1 or part 2 or both. I do want to know your thoughts about it in the comments. If you think Scott is guilty, if you think he is innocent, we don't know. Okay, we weren't there. We're not here to prove Scott's innocence or guilt. We're just here to break apart the evidence of how it could lean one way or the other, because obviously we're not crime scene investigators. We're not a juror. We're not a judge. We're not an attorney. But I don't know about Aspen, how long you followed this case, but I've been following this since 2002.
From the beginning.
So it's one of
from the very
those,
beginning.
It's not where I just jump on here and talk about something I just watched. It's not like I had no information about this case and then reviewing this. Like, I'm open-minded to hearing the opposite side, but as of right now, my mind has not been persuaded, and there was no new evidence. And the two pieces that I think would be new, I don't think serve a purpose. Hopefully in the part 2, we're going to see and hear more of why they're claiming he's innocent with this new evidence.
I hope so. And I just, for anyone out there that wants to make a true crime documentary or anything, don't underestimate your audience. Don't treat them like they're idiots. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I will say, as invested in this case as I've been since 2002, like any other case, now that I've been on the other side of that world and I've sat in these meetings with people with these suits from networks, like that are in it, that are completely all financial. It's very, very, very cutthroat business. And I will say, I have to watch these things through a slightly different lens now, where I can't help but pick up on things that.
Yeah, you see it from a different perspective than me.
I mean, not that it takes away for, because my focus will always
but you've experienced something else
on the justice, the truth, and if someone's innocent, I want to know. But I want the victim. I like to see things where the focus is on the victim, and they're remembered. And but again, like it is something I can't help but focus on a little bit too, as far as like part of me watching this was, I'm like, I don't know how it got past some of the legal team, but because I know the discussions that it was insane, just in my personal experience with the docuseries I did. Not that we were doing anything problematic, but I mean, it was like every little thing, had to be reviewed by a legal team. And granted, we had a news organization behind us.
Yeah.
We were ABC News. So, they're going to hold it to a different standard. And I'm not discrediting A&E at all. It's an interesting, it's an interesting take. So, excited to watch part 2. I hope they change my mind.
All right. Well, guys, we'll be back with part 2 very shortly. In the meantime, check Aspen out on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook under Aspen Connor. You can also follow me on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook under True Crime with Tiff, Kline, and my other podcast, Turning the Corner for a Better Tomorrow with Kline's Corner. We are on Apple, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and YouTube, and all your other favorite streaming platforms. I want to send out love and respect and prayers to Lacey Peterson's family, and love to Lacey and Connor. And in the back of my mind and heart for this whole case, it's not about Scott. It's giving Lacey the love and like she deserves. And I feel like this is very...
Respect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Sharon Rocha had said, she's tired. There's no new evidence. Let Lacey rest in peace. He's been convicted. As of right now, I haven't seen anything. But again, we'll see that in part 2, and we will be back soon.